Good morning. This is the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission. It is Wednesday, April 8th, 2026. This is our weekly business agenda. We will start with the roll call.
Thank you. Commissioner Ackerman,
Here.
Commissioner Cross,
Present.
Commissioner Mesner,
Here.
Commissioner Oath,
Here.
and Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 commissioners present.
Good morning to everyone. Good morning to the folks that are listening in. There's 60 of them already. We've got a somewhat busy agenda. We start with commissioner comments. Does any commissioner have comments? Seeing none, we'll move to consent agenda. Does anyone have questions on consent? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve consent?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right. The first docket is docket 241200313, an oil and gas development plan proposed by Crystal Peak Resources. As petitioners Maverick Mineral Partner and Save the Aurora Reservoir. This is the State Sunlight Long OGDP. And this is on the docket just for a procedural discussion. The commissioners heard this matter on multiple occasions and basically remanded it back to Crestone for additional analysis, which was filed on April 6th. So that should be in our inboxes. It is in the file, and everyone should have access to the additional analysis that we requested. This matter is teed up for a hearing on April 21st at 9 a.m. That's a special Tuesday hearing, so that we can hear this matter once again. Since the commissioners did the remand or the request for additional information, I wanted to bring it up from a process perspective this morning to inform the parties what I and hopefully the rest of the commissioners think is the relevant process for the April going forward. So on April, I guess 7th, I thought it was 6th, but anyway, on either the 6th or the 7th, Crestone filed its supplemental alternative location analysis and additional information that was requested by the Commission's December 10th, 2025 order. We do have the 2 petitioners. I believe it's appropriate to give them an opportunity to file a brief response to the Crestone filing. I'd like those responses, and again, I'm throwing this out there and commissioners can debate whether what I'm thinking makes sense or not, but I would suggest that petitioners be given until Wednesday, April 15th to file a brief response to the filings. Responses are limited to 5 pages. Second point, I do not believe commissioners need further information or input from ECM staff, what either written or on the record at the hearing. I believe the commissioners asked for the additional information, and we can wade through it to determine the next steps on the OGDP. As I mentioned, the hearing on the OGDP and Crestone's filings is set for April 21st, 2026 at 9 p.m. I suggest that we, as is usual, would not take additional public comment. We've had extensive public comment both at the hearing, in writing, and at the 511 hearing. I would give Crestone an opportunity to provide a presentation at the hearing with a limitation of 45 minutes. I would give each petitioner up to 10 minutes each for a response, and then Crestone would have an opportunity for a reply for 10 minutes. So those are my musings relevant to procedural issues in this docket. Does any commissioner have thoughts, concerns, other ideas on the procedural steps for this docket? Commissioner Messner?
I think that's all fine. And understanding that I only saw this yesterday, and so I have not gone through the whole thing and read every page of the dozens of pages that were submitted. But it does seem to talk a lot about kind of recategorization of things from the state land board and Piedmont grasses and things, and then Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and And so I'm trying to understand if there's opportunities to better understand. Certainly, I'm sure that there's lots of information that was provided in the submittals, and like I said, I haven't had an opportunity to read those. But should they be willing, having some time available for state land board or CPW to be able to maybe clarify, as they provided consultation on this, it appears. So that seems like it might be helpful.
Yeah, no, that's a good, point. And we all just got this yesterday, and yesterday we were busy. And so I too have only sort of skimmed through the submittal applications. I did note the lengthy discussion about, is it Piedmont grass, prairie grass? I'm not sure. Lengthy discussion about rangeland and cattle and moving cattle around from state land board. And I saw something from CPW as well. I think what we should do is let's reserve the right to call both and or any of our state sister agencies to clarify or provide additional perspective. And maybe the best way to do that would be when you meet with the LAS specialist to go over this. If you have specific questions, just let them know that you're going to want to see State Land Board or CPW or both at the hearing. And then hearings manager Thomas can allocate some time for those two agencies if a majority of us, or even if just one of us, wants to hear from either of those agencies. Right now, I don't know if I do because I really haven't had a chance to go through it. I think they're kind of in the same place, Commissioner Messner, but let's reserve that right to have sister agencies also have an opportunity to better inform us with regard to the submitted information. Does that work? All right. Other commissioners okay with all that? All right, then I don't know if we need a motion. Maybe we just give direction to the hearing officer to codify a hearing, pre-hearing order in line with the thoughts that we've articulated this morning. Mr. Bedreau, does that work for you?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think direction to the hearing officer with an order is sufficient. I believe the hearing officer is Jana Jacobs.
Okay. Well, we will have Ms. Jacobs do that on behalf of the commission. And thanks to everyone for allowing us to have this slight opportunity to discuss the procedural matters relevant to that docket. All right, we will continue down our docket. Next up is 2601-00017, high priority habitat map rulemaking. The applicant is ECMC staff, and I believe we're going to hear from Colorado Parks and Wildlife first. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Robbins, Commissioners. My name is Karen Voltura. I am the statewide energy lead for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I will be presenting our proposed 2026 HPH map updates this morning. I'll just share my screen. Are those slides visible now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll be presenting this morning on the proposed 2026 HPH map updates. We continue to work with ECMC on an annual basis for updates to these maps per the administrative process detailed in 181 rules. These are maps that were developed in 2025 by CPW, and today's presentation will go through a few process summaries, but focus more on the maps. I feel like we've come full circle. This is, I did the first map updates in 2022 for the Southeast region, and we're sort of back through the whole set of regions back to the Southeast region for this year's updates. I do want to start with a few of the process adjustments we've made with ECMC over the course of these rulemakings since 2022. We've added a review of period prior to the notice of rulemaking that was requested by stakeholders in previous years. We have added, this ECMC stakeholder meeting is now held prior to the notice of the rules. There are opportunities for parties to provide feedbacks on the rules via these stakeholder meetings, as well as an open Google form. We have added additional individual meetings with stakeholders, primarily the operators in the region with the most significant changes, but also other groups. We provide a written summary of proposed changes resulting from the SAM updates. We've gotten a lot of feedback that parties really did like that written summary. And then additional map products produced by our GIS team. The one on this slide shows a public site where someone can go in and just click on whichever layers they want to see and zoom in on their particular holdings or an area of interest. I'll be showing some other products throughout the presentation where you can do this side by side, comparing this year's proposed maps with the existing maps, as well as these being available on the site Codex, which is the Colorado Data Explorer, as well as from our GIS site and on the ECMC's own GIS site. In terms of stakeholder outreach that we've carried out for this rulemaking, we'll talk about the majority of the updates to big game via the species activity map process are in the Southeast region. So we reached out to all of the Southeast region operators, which at this stage are mostly the helium operators in Cheyenne County and Los Animas County. We did have meetings with WaveTech and then offered meetings to the others. We met with KOGA and EPI and their members. We met with representatives from the Western Rural Local Governments, and then responded to one submitted question from an operator that is not regulated by ECMC. And so the Southeast region staff reached out to them and responded to their question about their mine site. So the timeline overall for this was that these maps were developed in the summer and fall of 2025 in, again, primarily those SAM sessions in the Southeast region. And then statewide raptor and grouse and prairie chicken data was compiled by our GIS team in the fall. In late December, the maps were submitted to ECMC by CPW, and they were published early January. In addition, we had the first public stakeholder meeting organized by ECMC on January 20th. Throughout January and February, we had additional stakeholder meetings, as mentioned before, and then the rulemaking was noticed on January 30th. From the time that the stakeholder meeting until after the notice, there was an ECMC Google form available for feedback. Again, we just received one comment from an operator not regulated by ECMC that we did respond to. And that leads us to today's hearing. Today we'll be going over statewide updates, as usual, to raptor nest data and grouse and prairie chicken habitats. We do have aquatic habitat updates in the Southeast region, and then the species activity mapping updates to big game, piping plover, eagle roosts, and bats for the Southeast region. This map shows the overall changes, and this was one of the maps made available to stakeholders throughout the process. Green shows the existing HPH, red is the proposed additions, and black are the proposed deletions from the maps. And we'll zoom in on all of these changes as we go through the presentation. If you look just at the no surface occupancy map layers, those habitat layers identified under 1202C in the rules, these are aquatic HPH, lek sites, raptor nest sites, bighorn sheep production, and state wildlife areas. Same thing on this map. It's a little harder to see at this, but these PDFs are available. Again, red are additional, leks or raptor nests, and black are deletions. And we'll again zoom in on a lot of these. We'll start with the overview of the grouse and prairie chicken updates. This is just a reminder that the two main habitats we do map for these are lek locations, and that's areas with any lekking activity in the previous 10 years. And then they have species-specific no surface occupancy buffers based on the literature, and those protect up to about 50% of the nesting locations. Under 1202D, we list these production habitats, and these are areas important for nesting and brood raising. These are mapped habitat layers for both lesser prairie chicken and greater sage grouse. For the other 4 species, these are just extended lek buffers. The biggest change for leks is an increase in greater prairie chicken leks. There was about a 35% increase over last year in terms of the lek identified by our staff. There were smaller increases for both Columbian sharp-tailed grouse and Plains sharp-tailed grouse, as well as for greater sage grouse. The lesser prairie chicken, unfortunately, did have a decrease of about 20% of lek locations, and these are historic leks that we have not been able to identify activity on in the past 10 years, and so that's sort of where they drop off the map. And then smaller decreases for Gunnison sage grouse. The production habitat corresponding to an increase in leks because they're for greater prairie chickens, their production area is essentially a larger buffer around the lek. You see a corresponding increase in acreage for greater prairie chickens. Again, smaller increases for those same, and again, no change for Gunnison's greater sage grouse or lesser prairie chicken, but remember that both greater sage grouse and lesser prairie chicken production areas are mapped independent of lek locations. Just to show you in a little more detail, the changes proposed in greater prairie chickens, you can see there are 2 primary areas on the map. This map product is one that was available to the public, and this allows you to compare the proposed maps with the current maps that are active with ECMC. And I've circled, these are just greater prairie chicken leks, and this is the far northeast corner of the state. So you can see Sedgwick County in the very far northeast corner has increased activity or increased lek survey activity. And then Kit Carson is that bottom corner. Kit Carson and then southern Yuma County is where most of those additional greater prairie chicken lek locations are. The Kit Carson one is a compilation of a few years of survey information. We don't have much oil and gas, but we do have a lot of renewable energy. And so those surveys, both by CPW and operators, have identified some additional leks, similar activities in that far northeast corner. Again, not a lot of oil and gas location or development, but a lot of other development type going on. So that did contribute a fair bit to the number increase in acreage for leks this year. The other statewide update is to the raptor nest data. Well, we've covered this in previous hearings quite in detail, but these nest status updates come from CPW's own internal survey data from our federal land partners, and trusted or verified partners with other research organizations and land managers, and then verified data either from county or other local planning agencies, developers, consultants, and NGOs. Bald eagle numbers had a slight increase this year. I think that's a little less than previous years, but about 3,800 acres were added. The biggest jump we see this year is with golden eagle, which is pretty good news for golden eagles across the West. A lot of their populations are declining, so to see this increased, this really does come from additional survey efforts from CPW that I'll talk about in a minute. Did see a decrease in ferruginous hawk nest locations. These are primarily on the Eastern Plains, and they are a state species of concern. And then we have smaller increases in both prairie and peregrine falcon NSOs. A little more detail, and this might be hard to see, but golden eagles, this is the far northwest corner. So you can see on the right the existing maps, and if you look compared to the other one, so north of Grand Junction and sort of south of State Highway 40, so between, I guess, Craig and Rangeley maybe, you'll see a increased risk or increased nest location from that particular area. CPW last year used helicopter surveys. This area really hadn't been surveyed since the 70s or 80s, but we knew there were eagles there. Many of these areas are just inaccessible for us to get to on foot or to survey. And those helicopter surveys identified a significant number of active golden eagle nests in that area. So these aren't necessarily new nests, but they were ones that we really hadn't had access to for at least 20 years. And so we are seeing an increased identification of those nests. The good news is these would have likely been identified during any sort of pre-construction or development. And so knowing where these are does help us have those conversations earlier in consultation. And there are opportunities this year, I believe, for additional surveys in other areas in the Northwest region. These aerial surveys are really typical of a lot of consulting. Anytime you need to cover a large area, Western US, a lot of golden eagle surveys are carried out this way. It was piloted in the Southeast region a few years ago, and we'll continue to do that in the Northwest region to get a better understanding of sort of how golden eagles are doing in Colorado. Aquatic updates. In previous years, we've presented some updates. We are now on the same update schedule as the SAM updates. So this year, the Southeast region, prior to this fall, reviewed all of the high priority aquatic habitat categories. And the plan going ahead is that these will again keep following sort of that SAM schedule. So whoever is doing SAM sessions will also update their aquatic maps. The Southeast region had minor changes to sport fish management waters and native species waters. These were mostly due to increased survey or new survey information in the last 5 years or 4 years since we updated the maps, as well as some changes in flow and water dynamics in some of these, especially ephemeral intermittent streams. There are no proposed changes to gold medal waters or cutthroat trout habitat. Again, pretty minor changes. I think there were maybe 20 small reaches that were changed, but 237 acre decrease in sport fish waters and a 600 acre increase in native species habitat identified. Oops. Okay. Okay, sorry. We'll move on now briefly to the SAM updates. And we've spent a lot of time in previous years covering the methodology. But again, this is a methodology to capture field data, agency knowledge, as well as information we've gathered either from collars, aerial surveys, or other surveys. SAM covers a huge number of types of habitat. I think we're up to over 150 different habitat types, and a subset of those are categorized within the high priority habitat maps. We'll be focusing in the Southeast region primarily on some of the big game updates. This is just the list of habitats that are included as SAM that are part of the high priority habitat list. These yellow circles show where some of those larger changes are in red, and then we'll look at each of these specific to the type of habitat that is being updated. Again, using these side-by-side maps, this is the bighorn sheep habitat in the Southeast region. A lot of folks don't realize they actually do have a lot of bighorn sheep in the Southeast region. And I think some of these changes illustrate the interesting dynamics, certainly in those canyon herds. So again, it's a little harder to see on here, but some of the changes in that middle square are the Purgatory River and associated canyons. And you can see along the eastern edge of the Pinyon Canyon DoD facility, they're expanding their range. Far southeast, there are some canyon herds down along the Oklahoma Panhandle and border with New Mexico that have expanded a little bit to the west. And then the other box shows another canyon herd south of Pueblo, and that was part of a translocation that the Southeast region did a few years ago, and that herd has expanded into more of the canyon. For pronghorn winter concentration, there's very little pronghorn winter concentration mapped in the Southeast region. Those herds tend to range pretty far along that area. This period of updates did cover a pretty significant winter event in November of 2024. There were pretty significant blizzard conditions out on the Eastern Plains and really most of the state, but certainly all of the Southeast region. And what that does is it does offer an opportunity for staff to sort of see in those severe winter events what habitat is more important to these herds. And again, we had almost no pronghorn winter concentration areas mapped on the Eastern Plains, but this really did identify particularly a location in Lincoln County where there was significant concentration of pronghorn during that storm. And again, further south, south of Pueblo, now south of Walsenburg, where there's another area mapped. Not a lot of acreage in total, but did identify through that storm a pretty significant addition in terms of where we think they need protections. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about elk. Elk, again, that winter event did help us with mapping both mule deer and elk habitats. But there's additional information that we have from some collar data for elk in the southeast region that did help us, again, identify some of their movements. The areas here are circled. This is all elk habitat, and it does show some changes west of Colorado Springs and kind of northwest of Fort Carson that shows some additional use of that area during the winter. The area around Lake Pueblo State Park to the west of there, they did sort of pull back a little bit and moved a little bit to the west in terms of where we understand they're using that habitat. And then on the far south, that's areas around Fisher's Peak State Park that we just have better understanding of those movements. We don't think they're really changing movements. For the most part within this area, but we have identified using that collar data some better resolution in terms of what habitat is actually important to them. So overall, relative to the statewide mapping, fairly small changes to elk severe winter range and winter concentration overall, very small changes to mule deer mapping, more changes again to the pronghorn winter concentration, not a lot of acreage, but new areas in the southeast region that we've been able to identify as important to those winter survival. And then some additional bighorn sheep winter, again, mostly through range expansion of those herds, but also through monitoring. The last major category I want to talk about are migration corridors. We did see overall changes to elk being the largest change, which I'll talk about in a minute, but also some changes to mule deer, far less significant changes to pronghorn and bighorn sheep. I think in large part to the southeast region, those canyon herds don't have anywhere to migrate to, so they might migrate within the canyon, but they're not moving between high and low altitude or different ranges for winter and their lambing areas. So I do think that's fairly unique to the southeast region and where those sheep occupy. Elk, again, the biggest information we have is from collar data. There are about 350 collared elk that we have data from for the 4 years since our last one, and really has informed those migratory movements more so than we were able to previously. And this is showing, this is the area sort of around Buena Vista where Highway 24 and 285 meet. And this shows you sort of a much better understanding using this collar data of how these animals are moving through that area. And this also did inform a little bit of the winter range there, but I think it's more obvious in these elk migration layers how much better our understanding is of how they're using their habitat and what's important during these migration time periods. And the thing with collar data is you can isolate it to the dates. So when they should be migrating, we can look at the locations. We also were able to improve the mapping on elk production by looking at those collar data during the calving times. And lastly, so the other sort of miscellaneous characters of those 309 E1, those consultation layers that aren't in either 1202C or D, very small changes to this. A lot of it driven by those golden bald eagle nests and the buffers we have around them to assess timing limitations. There were no changes to our bat data, and there were unfortunately again small decreases to both piping plover and least tern production areas. Piping plover are a federally listed species. Least tern were federally listed but were since delisted. These tend to nest along some of the Eastern Plains reservoirs around Rocky Ford. Unfortunately, a lot of those reservoirs are dry this year, so we may see more decrease to this, but we did map relative to 4 years ago less habitat for them. And I think that is all I have in terms of presentation, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate the thorough nature of the presentation and the tons of new information. So, commissioners, the witness is available for questions. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really only just have one question, but like you, appreciate the work done by CPW. And I particularly wanted to mention that I appreciate the expansion of the outreach work and the preparatory work that CPW and ECMC staff have kind of developed and are doing in preparation for this hearing. I agree with you, Dr. Voltor. I think it's very helpful to the interested members of the public, and also appreciate the responses both by our staff and your staff on outreach for the public comment that we received. I just was going to ask you about the greater prairie chicken lek changes, and I might have missed it, but what's the what's the CPW process for identifying and mapping those leks? Are they all considered active leks that are cited, or how does that work? What constitutes you placing them on that list?
So there are survey protocols that are followed by staff. These are almost all, I believe all these are CPW staff identified. So in the spring, during the lekking season, they will go out and identify those lek locations. It's species specific, and I'd have to look at that. I know for a lot of them, they have to be seen for 2 years in a row initially. So if you just see a bird, they're calling by themselves, that doesn't constitute a lek. It generally is two or more birds lekking for either multiple days, or like sometimes the first year it will be identified as a provisional lek, and then if seen again, it'll become an active lek. But once there is what is considered active lekking, behavior based on that species, it does stay in the database for 10 years, unless we know the area has been, paved over, and the habitat's gone, then it might be taken out sooner. But it is species specific surveys identified by behavior, and also a pattern. It has to be like more than once or more than one bird. So it's trying to catch where you just have a random bird, calling in a field doesn't make it a lek. You have to have specific behaviors, and you have to generally have more than one bird, one male calling.
Thanks, I appreciate that. And I know, for example, in the Southeast region, when we talk about lesser prairie chicken, and there are, for example, windmills or something that go up that degrade the habitat around lekking areas. That's something that CPW takes into mind if oil and gas is proposing something there. Is that the same with greater prairie chickens? So even though that will stay on the database for 10 years, each time there's an OGDP that requires consultation, CPW does an active consultation and assesses more carefully these types of areas. Is that correct?
Yes, and there's specific, essentially, impact buffers, and those are also species specific. So greater prairie chickens, their lek buffer is 0.6 miles because they appear to be less reactive, I guess, to infrastructure, and they would have a specific buffer for oil and gas, whereas lesser prairie chickens are more sensitive to those, so they have a larger lek buffer in the rules. It's 1.25 miles. And then the assessment of that site specific also takes into account the impact of a well on that species, if that makes sense. So for lesser prairie chickens, when we do it, a well impact is about 300 meters.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I guess I just have one more question that, each time you have updates, often there are some removals too. And in this case, there were removals. And can you just kind of give us a picture frame estimate of why removals occur? I mean, they used that habitat at one point, and why do you end up removing some portions from high priority habitat maps?
A lot of it, there's a few reasons. For leks, if we have not identified activity on that location for 10 years, they fall off automatically. We do try to resurvey. That's generally not because we haven't surveyed. It's just that we have not observed birds on that location. And that can be for a few reasons. It can be changes in dynamics. It can be changes in land use. We're seeing more and more in some of the Cheyenne County, the more development that happens, both renewable and other, they're abandoning those leks. Some of them are just there's not enough birds, and so you just don't see that activity. So that's really why the lesser prairie chicken leks are dropping. Our population numbers are dropping, and they're just not occupying as many leks. For others, a lot of it's development. So certainly for some of the big game, as areas of either residential development, or other types of development, they may move out of an area. And again, we tend to not do it if it's like 1 year, but if that becomes a pattern, yeah, we do want to remove that from the HPH so that we're not triggering consultations that aren't necessary. Some of that is captured more in the consultation where you get on site and realize that, there's now a mine there or a solar field or a residential development, and you can make that assessment. But the more we can capture that in the maps, the more accurate sort of our consultation process can be.
Thank you. And I keep coming up with one more, so I think this will be my last one. I apologize. This is more of a global question, and I appreciate, once again, your presentation. During the 181 process, of course, we, implemented this regulatory update, and we implemented to some degree CPW high priority habitat in our regulations themselves, hence the rulemaking update. But can you explain, do you use these high priority habitat maps in a fashion that's broader than just oil and gas in the state?
Yes, they are utilized for all of our land use commenting. So all land use and energy commenting is based on these HPH maps. There are some other site-specific things we work with, but these maps, and in December when we finalize them, they are then utilized for all of our other commenting, whether it be energy, transmission, residential, mining, recreation. These are the basis of sort of our impact assessment. The same as they are, but they are only regulatory if either an agency like ECMC or a county does make them part of their permitting authority. But CPW does use these for all types of land use.
Great, thank
and
you,
county
Dr. Bolter.
consultations, yeah.
Appreciate that, and appreciate your continued support and help throughout the year and helping us to achieve our joint mission of protecting Colorado's wildlife.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Further questions for the witness? All right, I'm not seeing further questions. Maybe stick around with us. We need to hear from a couple of parties briefly, and then we'll get into deliberations. I believe now we are going to hear from API Colorado and Colorado Oil and Gas Association for 3 minutes. Ms. Larson, welcome.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioners. Good morning, everyone. I am Mimi Larson. I'm with the law firm Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck. I'm appearing on behalf of the Colorado Oil and Gas Association and also this morning API Colorado. Mr. Jim Martin, who is counsel to API Colorado, was not able to be with us this morning, and so he asked that I provide these comments. I'd like to begin by thanking Dr. Voltura and all of the CPW staff who worked on the preparation of the 2026 High Priority Habitat Map rulemaking. COGA and API especially appreciate CPW's continued efforts to make the development of these maps more transparent and their outreach to affected stakeholders. As the commissioners are aware, and as you read in COGA and API's joint pre-hearing statement and response, we take no issue with the high priority habitat maps proposed for adoption this morning. We also would like to highlight that no party to this rulemaking has opposed the proposed maps. COGA and API strongly urge the Commission to adopt the proposed maps and the statement of basis and specific purpose without any amendments. We ask that the Commission adhere to the narrow focus of the notice of rulemaking and would decline any requests that may be made to seek changes or additions to the current rules governing wildlife protection. Finally, COGA and API would like to thank ECMC staff for their efforts in this rulemaking and again, CPW staff. So those are my comments this morning. If anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Commissioners, questions for Ms. Larson? Seeing none, thank you very much for participating and for providing the perspective of COGA and API. It's helpful. All right, we now will hear from Colorado Wildlife Federation and National Audubon Society. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Robbins and Commissioners. Tarney Dahl, representing Audubon Rockies, National Audubon Society, the Colorado Wildlife Federation, and Western Resource Advocates. Just very quickly, these wildlife groups support adoption of the updates to the HPH maps as recommended by CPW, and just appreciate the efforts of the Commission and CPW and the other parties to this rulemaking. It's clear the process is working well and achieving the statutory intent And just thank the Commission, ECMC staff, and CPW for their work to protect wildlife. Thank you.
Any questions for the witness? All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate your being with us. Next on the agenda is slated party rebuttals and closing statements. Does anyone have a rebuttal and or closing statement? If so, just visualize yourself. All right. Seeing none, we move to commissioner questions and deliberations. Does any commissioner have further questions, or does any commissioner desire to start deliberations? Commissioner Ackerman.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to make just a couple of deliberative comments. And I wanted to start by, saying that from time to time we have people that say you approved oil and gas permits prior to Senate Bill 181 and the significant rulemakings that took place there, and you continue to approve the preponderance of oil and gas permits that come before you post Senate Bill 181. How did it make any difference? And I would hold up this wildlife process is a way that tremendous difference has been made during that process, and it's just one component, one aspect of how difference has been made through the Senate Bill 181 rulemakings. Prior to the Senate Bill 181 rulemaking, CPW would comment on permits from, at the time, the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, and Oil and Gas Conservation Commission would take into account some of their comments and would implement them as they could and as was workable for industry. And there wasn't significant progress in being able to protect wildlife in a consistent way. Through the 1200 series changes in the 181 rulemaking and the adoption that we do every year of these high priority habitat maps, we have the best real-time information. We have it incorporated into our regulations. We have pre-consultative processes set forth, and the industry works very closely with CPW in a much more cooperative fashion in wildlife protection stipulations and wildlife protection areas throughout Colorado in oil and gas development. And so I would hold up our 1200 series wildlife regulations as a model for everywhere to increase wildlife protections, not just in the development of oil and gas and energy, but in the development of all types that takes place in and across wildlife habitat. I think CPW, and of course, as most people know, I'm biased, but I think CPW is an incredible agency full of excellent professionals that are very good at what they do. And I really appreciate the joint efforts that we've put together to protect wildlife here in Colorado with regard to oil and gas development. Continue to encourage all others to be able to look at CPW's recommendations the way that we do as we work through our permitting processes to implement the very best protections for wildlife. And then I also wanted to say that I really appreciate the approach of industry to this. Industry, I'll just be very frank, he gets a lot of black eye comments in Colorado. And, historically, maybe some deserved. But in the end, industry has worked very, very hard on this, as we can see through through KOGA and API's input today, but also the individual companies as they work with CPW and as I've worked with them throughout the state, and I see them with their also wildlife professionals have full intent to protect wildlife to the best of their ability while still implementing their missions. I think that if all development took place in a way that attempted to put wildlife in a protective position, recognizing that development is going to take place of all types as we move forward, I think we'd be in a much better place. So I'm excited continually about the 1200 series rules. I think we did a really good job. I think we continue to do a good job of protecting wildlife. And I think these high priority habitat update maps are a very, very important part of the real-time protection of wildlife throughout the state. So just mostly a thank you and I guess a little bit of a patting ourselves on the back as well as CPW and the operators and others that have participated in this, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Ackerman. I think it's appropriate to hear from you first on deliberative thoughts. Other commissioners with thoughts? Commissioner Ackerman, do you desire to make a motion?
I sure would, Mr. Chair, and I think the appropriate motion might just be to to kind of mimic what Ms. Rogers said, which is to adopt these draft maps as proposed and recommended by the director and her staff.
And second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Davenport, does that appear acceptable?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I would just suggest an addition that in addition to adopting the maps as presented, to adopt the statement of basis and purpose as presented as well.
So amended. Thanks.
And the second is good on that too?
Yes. Yes.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. All right, thank you very much. We really appreciate that non-contentious rulemaking. Those are satisfying. Let's take a 10-minute break. Let's return at 9:56, and then we'll hear from staff on enforcement issues. All right, we are returning back to order. This is the Energy and Carbon Management Commission on Wednesday, the 8th of April at 9:56. And next up on the agenda is a ECMC Compliance Unit Area Update 2025-26 accomplishments. I recognize Mr. Gomez and Mr. Carlisle.
Good morning, Chair Robinson and Commissioners, and to the others attending online. My name is Jason Gomez. I'm the Compliance Manager for the ECMC Compliance Unit, and I appreciate this opportunity to introduce myself, my team, and the work of our unit's accomplishments over the past year. I assumed this role with the ECMC a little over 15 months ago as a new compliance manager. My experience in the oil and gas field totals more than 27 years. This includes over 13 years with the Commission, where my roles have been inspector, drone coordinator, and most recently compliance unit supervisor in the DJ Basin area. I'd like to welcome everyone to our presentation. This time I'll go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Welcome everyone to the 2025 Compliance Unit Overview presented to the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission. Today we'll be walking through the current state of our unit, the work we do, and where we are heading. The Compliance Unit is a mission-critical unit for the ECMC. We are the eyes, ears, face of the ECMC in the field. Our staff and their families live, work, and play in the areas they are assigned to regulate. And as such, we live the ECMC mission statement daily. I'd also like to say that we're kind of like our post office. We're out there, rain, sleet, snow, COVID, doesn't matter. We're out there doing inspections. At this time, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Craig Carlisle.
Hello, my name is Craig Carlisle. I have a long and varied experience in the oil and gas industry. I joined the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, now the ECMC, in November 2013, and have enjoyed working in the field as an inspector. Otherwise, that is now known as a compliance specialist. Throughout this presentation, Jason and I will cover several major points. We will start by reviewing our organizational structure, our strategic goals, our latest statistics. We will also cover recent improvements we've made to the audit and inspection process, discuss how industry evolution is impacting our field operations, and highlight our progress in using advanced inspection techniques and the need to upscale the career path options available to the compliance unit staff. Let's begin with the structure of the compliance unit. Currently, we have an allocation of 28 positions, with one position currently open. Our team is organized with a manager, Jason, and 4 field supervisors who cover various geographical areas. The supervisors collectively oversee a team of 22 compliance specialists. Recently, a former supervisor position has been reallocated to establish a new training and development staff authority position and a new work lead position. We're excited about the potential to expand the work lead opportunities to additional geographic areas in the near future. Our collective expertise is truly impressive. Our staff brings over 650 years of combined oil and gas field experience. This industry knowledge and extensive field experience is our primary strength. However, we also have significant academic credentials, including 1 associate's degree, 5 bachelor's degrees, and 3 master's degrees. Recently, we have been stressing an audit approach to our inspections, taking a definition from the American Society for Quality. An audit is an on-site verification activity, such as an inspection of a process or quality system, to ensure compliance with requirements. For our team, details include a review of the forms submitted by the operators, ensuring that the field operations actually reflect what has been submitted by the operators. Moving on to our strategic goals. We are driven by 2 somewhat conflicting goals. First, establish audit consistency. That is striving to have each audit produce the same outcome regardless of who performed the audit. Secondly, is to continuously improve the audit process. We understand this is paradoxical. Do it the same each time, however, but do it better each time. However, we've been making progress on both fronts. A snapshot of our performance statistics for 2025. The compliance unit has submitted over 29,000 well inspections and conducted over 15,000 location inspections. During 2025, 700 wells were drilled and more than 1,400 wells plugged. Many of these activities were overseen in the field by a compliance specialist. Additionally, the compliance unit has investigated and responded to 162 public complaints during the year. Our audit process follows a workflow starting from what prompts or initiates an audit to where the inspection documentation is ultimately distributed. An audit is prompted by several criteria such as a complaint, the due date for an annual underground injection control well inspection, field operation notices submitted by operators, a well's risk score, or the elapsed time since the previous inspection. The actual audit consists of routine field inspections with potentials for corrective actions through more advanced studies such as thermal imagery, sound studies, ground scans, or developing a 3D model of an entire location using drone captured imagery. Results are then distributed via the inspection document to operators, various ECMC departments, other state and federal agencies, and the public at large through the ECMC well file. So a typical day in the life of a compliance specialist is to organize their routing according to the priorities outlined above. When on a location, the principal objective is to identify any safety concerns, check for any rule violations, which may affect public health, safety, or the environment. And at this point, the specialist digs into the well file and ensures that the details of the well file are consistent with their field observations. A specialist aims to audit about 5 locations in a day, subject to the usual challenges of geographic issues, road conditions, weather complaints, or other intervening circumstances. As our highest priority, complaints coupled with our goal of responding within 24 hours of being notified by our complaint department creates a new plan for that day's work activity. On a good day, no problem locations, good roads, no complaints, it is possible to audit more than just 5 locations. While it varies by region, locations in the Denver-Julesburg Basin are averaging approximately 1 inspection per 18 months. per location. Beyond standard audits, our operational responsibilities include crucial safety oversight for field operations. We are also responsible for witnessing critical wellbore integrity events like cementing operations, mechanical integrity tests, and plugging operations. Furthermore, we conduct ongoing monitoring, which encompasses incident observations and field audits to ensure ECMC forms are properly implemented in the field. With that, I'll turn it back over to Jason.
Thank you, Craig. To understand the increasing complexities of our work, it is important to look at the evolution of oil and gas sites. On the slide, you see photographs of a typical 1999 location, which featured simpler equipment and would historically produce around 683 barrels of oil. Contrast that previous slide with a modern consolidated facility. As you can see from the aerial view, these new locations are massive and vastly more complex, with the location's first year production being around 2 million barrels of oil. Inspecting these sites requires a much more sophisticated and technical approach. Some of the benefits to a consolidated site. These consolidated sites facilities offer significant land use and environmental benefits, as you could see on the previous slide. The new consolidated sites service a service area of 11.5 square miles and have 60 horizontal wells. Majority of the process piping is above ground, maximizing leak detection. The site is also monitored for gas and fluid leaks 24/7, as well as security monitored. For locations, 4 locations are now replacing approximately 100 legacy or vertically drilled locations. There are no flares, no production tanks. There's reduced truck traffic and a 4-to-1 flow line reduction. But along with that technological advancements, there's several issues for the inspectors. It requires a new approach to our inspection process and considerably more time to inspect. Looking ahead to the next frontier for our responsibilities are actively expanding into new areas. We are currently developing inspection processes and procedures for 2 Class 6 carbon sequestration wells, as well as geothermal wells. Additionally, we are exploring new technology to assist us in our daily work, and we are heavily involved in subsurface regulatory efforts, including seeking primacy of Class 6 wells to join our current EPA primacy of Class 2 wells. To keep up with these modern and high production facilities, the compliance unit has embraced numerous innovations. We have standardized our report summaries for clarity and efficiency, and our unit has created an internal notification form to help track issues observed in the field and handoffs to other units within our agency to assure nothing slips through the cracks. From a technological standpoint, we are leveraging mobile internet via Starlink, which has allowed us to move forward with the development of a new field inspection report. We also utilize drones to create 3D images to create a map of each location, and a new 360-degree camera producing ground scans for a complete and accurate depiction of the site at the time of the inspection. As part of the innovation initiated by the compliance unit, we have pioneered and piloted what is now being introduced by Adam Craich in the drone program as the Energy Location Evaluation via Advanced Technology and Efficiency, or for short, ELEVATE program. At this time, we'd like to share a brief video with you to explain some of the innovations in more detail.
This is the brief on ECMC's new inspection technology.
Now, this might look simple, but it's a complete game changer. It's a mobile satellite internet unit right in an inspector's truck. This means they have full access to all their data and systems, even in the most remote corners of the state. The office is now literally wherever their truck is parked. And that connectivity powers tools like this one. This is a daily map. An inspector can see the entire state, zoom in on any well, and instantly see its entire history, inspections, any violations, and whether they've been fixed. It allows them to be really smart and targeted so they can focus their time where it's needed most. They're also taking to the skies. They use drones to capture thousands of images, and then they stitch them all together into a fully interactive 3D model like this. It's amazing. And for an even closer look, they have something called the ground scan. An inspector literally just walks or drives through the facility with a 360-degree camera, and the result is basically a private street view of the entire location. Every pipe, every valve, every sign is documented, creating this perfect, permanent record of the site's condition on that specific day.
In summary, these advanced inspection tools have already demonstrated their effectiveness within the compliance unit. Comprehensive implementation of these techniques is projected to deliver substantial benefits to the following key work units: enforcement, environmental, reclamation, permitting, cumulative impacts, engineering, and the Orphan Well Program. The deployment of these tools marks a critical advancement in helping ECMC successfully achieve its mission.
Our recent initiatives have also included to launch a new orphan well inspection program that facilitates training and development of our new staff, as well as ensuring once a well has been turned over to the orphan well program, it is still being monitored for any risks. We've also created a dedicated compliance unit website, which serves as an archive of our training materials and helps preserve institutional knowledge for future inspectors. Furthermore, we're actively developing a QR code application for our information system and signs. We anticipate launching a pilot program within the next couple of months to demonstrate the value of using QR codes, particularly for emergency response and addressing various other possible signage issues. This time I'll click on one of the QR codes, and you're welcome to scan it if you would like. But I'll be taking us to where it's going to take us to anyway, here in just 1 second. For those who would like to scan. And this is where it actually takes you to. So when it takes you to the site, it provides location information, such as wells, which wells are served by the battery, imagery of the location, muster points, which are marked on the map for emergency responders purposes, and a key feature would be for emergency purposes, is a lot of time in the field, we get told the nearest hospital is here, about approximately 25 miles away or whatever. This gives you a live map from the location to the nearest hospital. Other information that'll be vital that we provided within the QR code will be emergency responders information, so they can go ahead and get a site map of the location, quantities of tanks, and an SDS of chemicals stored on location, which is vital for emergency responders. Our compliance unit's achievements are directly attributed to the exceptional professionalism, creativity, and innovation of our staff. To effectively keep pace with rapidly evolving technology and our growing sophistication of industry, we must, however, expand the available career paths for our compliance unit. Additionally, we need to incentivize our compliance unit to maintain this continued level of team innovation. All the innovation that you've seen presented to you today was done by the compliance unit itself, not directed, but needed. And they took the initiative to go ahead and create that. I'd like to take time to thank you very much for attending and for listening to our presentation. And at this time, I'd like you to take any questions you may have.
Trying to find my unmute button. Thank you both for the really comprehensive approach to the work that you're doing. I don't have questions. I will note that the slides were really well done and provided a lot of information. I think in particular looking at the older wells versus the newer wells and then the evolution of your team as you work on enforcement with newer wells was really intriguing to me as one commissioner. Commissioners, do folks have thoughts, questions for the panel? Commissioner Cross?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I'll just be brief, and this is not solely to the compliance department, but I do want to say that in our West Slope Task Force meetings, there has been a lot of positive comments about the interaction and collaborative nature that the compliance group has taken with respect to operators and trying to make sure things get resolved in an efficient way. And so I just wanted to highlight that for all the stakeholders as well, that not only the changes that we're seeing here, like the increased drone use, et cetera, but just the changes overall are having positive outcomes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Cross. Others with thoughts, comments, or questions? All right, well, I'm not seeing any. Once again, thanks for taking time to put together all of the good work in the summary fashion for us and for the people that are listening in as well. Really well done. We have 104 people listening in, so thank you very much.
Thank you again.
All right, let's take 5 and return to the next docket. And while we're doing that, if we could elevate the attorneys as well as the witnesses, that would be helpful. We'll return at 10:22. All right, welcome back. Energy in Colorado Commission hearing. Let's see, we're now looking at a docket 2406-00157. This is an oil and gas development plan, Crestone Peak Resources, and it's called the file OGDP. Mr. McGee, good morning. Do you have your witnesses available for swearing in?
I believe they are all here, yes.
A.G. Boudreau?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll ask all the witnesses to be visualized. When I call your name, please raise your hand and state your first and last name and swear to tell the truth. Jeff Annable. Annable.
My name is Jeff Annable. I swear to tell the truth.
Caleb Roosh.
My name is Caleb Roush, and I swear to tell the truth.
Bob Breshnahan. I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Breshnahan.
Mr. Bresnahan has not accepted the invite yet. We're working on that.
Mary East.
My name is Mary East, and I swear to tell the truth.
Apologies if I get this one wrong. Also, Aaron Schleybaugh.
My name is Aaron Slabaugh, and I swear to tell the truth.
Laura Artenson.
Mr. Boudreau, Laura is an attorney with Beatty Wozniak.
Gotcha. And is that also the case with Melinda Moraine?
That's correct.
So the only one we have left is Bob Breshnahan, correct?
That's correct. Now, I apologize. I thought he was on, but looking back, he may not be able to join since we are on earlier than initially scheduled.
That being the case, do we have all your witnesses sworn in?
I believe so. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you for getting through that process piece. Under the docket that I have before me, it looks like that the first presenter would be Matt Sura, Special Counsel for the Town of Frederick.
That's correct.
Good morning. I also have a witness, and that's Robert Aronoff.
Is he? I see him as well. Let's go ahead and get him sworn in.
Great.
Ms. Aronoff, would you please raise your hand, state your first and last name, and swear to tell the truth?
My name is Robert Aronoff, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Sura.
Great. I'll have Robert start, and I'll take up about halfway through.
All right, Matt, if you are the slides up, sorry. If you could go to the first slide, that'd be great. Much appreciated. Let me get things in order here. Bear with me 1 second. All right. Good morning, commissioners and ECMC staff, and anyone else that may be listening today. For the record, my name is Robert Arnoff, and I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to provide comments today as the oil and gas liaison and local governmental designee for the town of Frederick. Master is also joining me today as Frederick's outside legal counsel for oil and gas matters. And Jason Myers, our town attorney, is available to answer any questions. The town of Frederick is participating in this matter as a local government with land use authority over the proposed file pad location. As you know, the town is currently reviewing a conditional use permit application tied to this ECMC Form 2A. Here you can see the general geographical location of Frederick, which is a 15 square mile municipality, and we have had over 600 oil and gas wells drilled in this 15 square mile municipality. Next slide, please. Because the local permitting process is not yet complete and has not been presented to our elected Board of Trustees for a final quasi-judicial vote, the town of Frederick neither supports nor opposes this ECMC application at this time. We will only form an official position once the full local process, including any required public hearings and votes, has concluded. Here you can see a satellite view of the file pad general area with the current file pad outlined in red. Next slide, please. The town has been actively engaging with the applicant Crestone Peak Resources since early 2025. For the record, here is the documented timeline of the local application review to date. On March 18th, the town facilitated a pre-application meeting, which is a requirement. On May 28th, 2025, the town facilitated a neighborhood meeting, which is also a requirement. And then skipping forward to July 15th, 2025, we received our first submittal from the applicant, which was deemed complete. Generally, we go back and forth a little bit, but on August 26, 2025, internal and external agencies completed their review, and comments were returned to the applicant. Fast forward to October 31st, which is when we received our second submittal. And then between December 8th and 11th, 2025, internal and external agencies once again completed their review of the second submittal and returned those comments to the applicant. Next slide, please. To continue, on January 21st, 2026, we received our third submittal from the applicant and then returned our internal and external agency review comments on February 24th, 2026. And then as of today, April 8th, 2026, the town is waiting on the applicant's fourth submittal. This timeline demonstrates the town's good faith effort to provide thorough, iterative review while maintaining an open line of communication with Crestone Peak Resources. Next slide, please. In this slide, you can see the general process for a conditional use permit application within the town of Frederick. As you can see, we are in stage 4 currently, where staff receives submittals from the applicant, review them, and provide comments. Then the applicant updates their documents based off of our comments and provide those in the next submittal. This process continues back and forth until we have an acceptable application to bring forth to the Planning Commission, who are the gatekeepers for the final stage of public hearing with the Board of Trustees. Next slide, please. This application may seem straightforward when taken for face value. However, this is an extremely complex application. The application itself proposes to expand the current file pad, which contains 20 wells, to 28 additional wells are proposed, bringing the total to 48 wells, which is quite a large number of wells for a single pad. In this slide, you can begin to see the complexity of having a large oil and gas facility with 48 wells in the middle of the proposed Shores on Plum Creek development. Next slide, please. Here you can see the approved preliminary development plan for the proposed Shores on Plum Creek neighborhood. The proposed Shores on Plum Creek development consists of 1,100 dwelling units, and both the preliminary plat and the preliminary development plan were approved and signed by the Board of Trustees in the town of Frederick. Next slide, please. This figure shows greater detail surrounding the file pad and the surrounding proposed neighborhood. In addition, you can see multiple water features, including ditches, ponds, and lakes. Next slide, please. As the application currently stands, it does not meet the requirements of the Town of Frederick's Land Use Code. Specifically, the applicant is requesting 3 separate variances under Article 4 of our code. For clarity, number 1, variances are required only when a proposal cannot comply with the adopted standards in our land use code. 2, each variance must be approved through a public hearing and a formal vote by the elected Board of Trustees. 3, all 3 variances must pass for the conditional use permit action to even be considered on its merits. If any one variance fails, the entire application fails. And 4, because this is a quasi-judicial process, the town staff are prohibited from speculating on how the Board of Trustees may vote. Variances are not common in local applications in Frederick. In fact, they are quite rare. The applicant, therefore, faces a significant uphill battle to secure approval of all 3 variances before the conditional use permit itself can proceed to a vote. Next slide, please. Under Section 477 of the Frederick Land Use Code, the Board of Trustees may grant a variance only if all of the following findings are affirmatively made. The variance will not be detrimental to the public good or impair the intent and purpose of the code. That's the first one. The second is the hardship is not self-imposed and is not based solely on personal or financial hardship, convenience, profit, or caprice. 3, the variance will not adversely affect adjacent properties, the neighborhood character, or the health, safety, or welfare of town citizens. And 4, the hardship is unique to the property and not general or reoccurring in nature. These are strict statutory criteria that the board must apply to the evidence presented at a public hearing. Next slide, please. The first variance request concerns location restrictions under Article 9 of the town's land use code, specifically Section 943B. The code requires oil and gas locations to be at least 1,000 feet from the nearest edge of any dwelling unit on lots greater than 2.5 acres, unless every affected surface owner and tenant provides explicit informed consent. In this case, an existing residential building unit is located less than 400 feet from the proposed edge of disturbance, which triggered the applicant to apply for this first variance. Next slide, please. The second variance also arises under Section 943, specifically 943G, which requires a 1,000-foot setback from existing and future direct water use supply reservoirs or classified water supply segments. Philly Lake is located approximately 640 feet west of the current edge of disturbance, necessitating the second variance. Next slide, please. The third variance concerns maximum permissible noise levels, which the town models after ECMC standards for residential, agricultural, and rural zones. 55 dBA and 60 dBc daytime, 50 dBA and 60 dBc nighttime. Frederick's code does not contain a provision allowing automatic increases based on ambient noise. The applicant is therefore requesting a variance to allow an increase of 7 decibels during the day and 5 decibels at night. To ensure the highest quality independent analysis, the town retained a qualified third-party sound consultant with the applicant's concurrence to review the ENRG studies submitted to both the state and to the town. The third-party review identified concerns regarding the confidence level in certain aspects of the applicant's noise modeling. At this time, I will now hand things off to Matt Sura to further discuss the subject of noise.
Thanks, Robert. Matt Sura, Special Counsel with Town of Frederick. This is the proposed condition of approval that is being supported by both Crestone and the Town of Frederick. It reads, Crestone voluntarily agrees to submit to the ECMC a Form 4 sundry containing an updated noise survey as if one had been required by the director pursuant to ECMC Rule 423B for both A scale and C scale noise that will be conducted jointly by Crestone and the Town of Frederick. Crestone further voluntarily agrees, as required by 423B, the new ambient noise survey will be used to update the existing noise survey and allowable noise limits on file with the ECMC. This proposal was prompted by the real concerns of the Town of Frederick with the information prepared in the noise mitigation plan, specifically the ambient noise study and allowable noise levels. Rule 423 allows the director to propose a condition of approval to require a new ambient noise survey after the permit was approved in the event that there were real concerns with the ambient noise survey and the record. This condition of approval would provide for a voluntarily updated ambient noise study. If this condition of approval is not included, Frederick is asking for a continuance to this hearing to allow the parties to address the shortcomings of the noise plan and allow Frederick trustees to vote on this location prior to it coming before the ECMC. The noise mitigation plan that is in the record is the April 14th, 2024 version. 3 subsequent versions of this noise mitigation plan have been offered to Frederick with different ambient noise results. A 4th noise mitigation plan is anticipated soon. The reason that Frederick rejected the April 14th, 2025 version is because the ambient noise monitoring was done in April of 2024 during a time of high winds. During 3 days, they were only able to capture 13 hours with winds low enough to be considered for the ambient noise study. An ambient noise study is important because if there is high ambient noise, the operator is able to request greater allowable cumulative noise limits for their permit. If ambient noise is found to already be above permissible levels, the rules allow for an increase of 7 decibels during the day and 5 decibels at night from the average noise at chosen compliance locations. Pursuant to Table 423.2, the cumulative noise levels could be increased a total of 10 to 15 decibels. Because noise is on a logarithmic scale, 3 decibel increase is a doubling of noise intensity. A change of 10 decibels is 10 times more intense. Again, to orient you, this is the existing file pad that will be expanded to 48 wells, and the yellow dots represent the 6 compliance points Crestone chose for the ambient noise study. Frederick has taken issue with the fact that Crestone is including the existing noise from their file pad. If a well site is already creating substantial noise like this, they cannot use that noise to justify making even greater noise when they expand that pad. If that were the case, a location that was out of compliance with noise regulations would only have to add, a specific number of maybe 1 well or some additional equipment to be able to increase their allowable noise 7 decibels during the day and 5 decibels at night. This is the noise from only 1 pump jack. Imagine the noise if they were all running. The April noise study only mentions traffic on Highway 52 and wind being the sole source of the noise. Again, to remind you, this is kind of the elephant in the room. This proposal was put forward well before the Crestone Peak Resources proposal was put forward and has preliminary approval. As you can see, there are proposed homes close within 200 feet of the proposed file pad expansion. And this is only due to the fact that Frederick passed regulations that would have required 500 feet. But this came before this proposal came before those regulations were put in place. Again, to remind you, this is the table 423.1, the maximum permissible noise levels, and these are based on what's both in state law and also in science. This is what is residential noise levels during the night is 50 decibels A scale, and all zones are 60 decibels. C scale is considered healthy. Again, the maximum cumulative noise levels in table 423.2 increases that 10 decibels at night for A scale and 15 to 10 decibels on C scale. Despite it being a very rural area, every one of the locations exceeded residential noise levels. As you can see here, these are all exceedances and where they're proposing greater allowable noise levels than permitted in residential noise area. Pursuant to 423D2, allowable noise may be adjusted if the ambient sound level already exceeds residential levels. Because ambient C scale noise levels were found in those 14 hours to be greater than residential noise levels, the allowable C scale noise they are requesting are listed in white. All of them are greater than the 60 decibels known to be safe. On nighttime, A scale decibel noise levels are also listed in yellow, which are greater than the 50 decibels allowed in rural residential areas. The differences are meaningful. Importantly, here's the new report that was done by Crestone for the town of Frederick. And as you can see, the operation allowables are different than what they're proposing for ECMC. And this is based on different results in their ambient noise study. And the differences are meaningful. Importantly, there are no locations that exceeded the nighttime residential noise limits. Only one location exceeded 8 decibel limits during the day. During a pre-hearing conference 2 months ago, we asked if Crestone was going to be updating their noise mitigation plan that was submitted to the ECMC with this new information, and they told us they would, but that did not happen. Again, here are the noise limits during the night that they presented to Frederick, and these are the limits that they're presenting to ECMC. This would provide for a dizzying number of different noise limits that are going to be that would be enforced by both Frederick and ECMC, making it really difficult for the neighbors to know what to expect from this 48 well file pad. There are some key findings that were discussed in detail in the report we submitted, and I'll pass it back to Frederick. I'll pass it back to Robert. Sorry.
Thanks, Matt. So just as far as our conclusion, as I stated at the outset, because we have not gone all the way through the conditional use permitting process and have a decision rendered from our town trustees, the town of Frederick cannot support and does not support or oppose this ECMC application. Frederick would like to thank Crestone for its continued efforts to resolve some of the concerns the town of Frederick had with the ambient noise study and noise mitigation plan. And we respectfully ask the ECMC to adopt the joint COA that will allow for a new ambient noise study and, if necessary, new cumulative noise limits. As an alternative, if you do not support the proposed COA, we ask for a continuance of this hearing. I also want to take a moment to just say that Town of Frederick staff and our elected officials are dedicated public servants and have devoted significant amounts of time to ensure adequate protections for our current and future residents, but we still have a lot more work to do. Thank you for your time and attention today. I'm happy to answer any questions about the local process or information presented today.
All right, thank you to both of you for the presentation. One kind of fundamental question that I guess I'd start off with, because we do have questions for you, is what's the rationale to place a condition of approval relevant to noise at the state level versus Frederick utilizing its own land use powers and oil and gas regulations dealing with noise at the local level?
Thank you for the question. First off, it's important that ECMC has good information on file and is using good information, and allowable noise levels are going to be protective of public health, safety, and welfare. That's in your interest, and it's certainly in the interest of the town of Frederick and its current and future residents. We believe that the information that you have on file is not accurate, and therefore we've been asking for it to be updated. Believe that it should be updated, and there are rules to allow it to be updated in the event, as in this case, that high winds gave faulty data.
Okay, I get that, but that partially answers the question. But the question is, you have your own rules and regulations that address noise, I would assume, and there's dual permitting authority in the state of Colorado. Crestone has to receive a permit from both the staff or ECMC as well as the town of Frederick. Again, I want to ask staff if they're comfortable with the proposed COA, and I want to ask Crestone, but I'm still a little bit perplexed as to why this is not an issue that could be done at the local level.
It is being addressed at the local level, Commissioner Robbins. The issue here is that, one, we want to have a consistent standard with ECMC, and two, we believe that ECMC has faulty data and therefore would have inspectors going out, and if they did receive a complaint, they would be using false allowable noise levels to determine whether or not Crestone was not in compliance or in compliance with allowable noise levels. If, right now they would be able to, would be permitted to have noise levels akin to a light industrial area in some areas. In some areas, it's different. There's a different standard in each one of their different compliance areas that they chose. It's unworkable, we believe, both for ECMC and Frederick, as I mentioned, would like to have the same noise levels and have a similar compliance plan that the ECMC is using.
Okay, thank you for the response. Further questions for the panel? Commissioner Messner?
Thanks, and appreciate Frederick being here as the relevant local government to this application. I guess just a few questions first to better understand Frederick's process, and I understand that you've updated your oil and gas regulations, and am I right that this is the first application that's gone through the new oil and gas regulations?
You're correct.
Okay. So the variance process, and I know different local governments do it different ways, but is the variance process baked into the land use review process, or is the variance process separate from the review of the application? Does it go before the application in order for them to secure their variances and then the application moves forward? Or is a decision on the application as a whole include those variances?
They're treated separately. So each variance must be presented to the board. We've married them all together so that we can go in front of the board one day with one full package. However, if any one of the variances that they present they'll be voted on and approved or denied. And if any of them are denied, then the conditional use permit application will not be heard, essentially.
Okay. But they will all be heard in theory on the same day, so they wouldn't be bifurcated in different hearings. It would be the same hearing.
No, we're bringing them all together, as you're stating.
Okay. Thanks for that. I wonder if you could talk to me a little bit about the shores on Plum Creek, and this is an approved subdivision. How long ago was it approved? What's the proximity of the lots to the existing site? And any regulations that the town has associated with new homes being built in proximity to an existing location, i.e. reverse setbacks that you might have.
This is a little bit complicated for us because it all comes down to timing of applications. So, as you know, as far as the town is concerned, when the board votes to approve an updated land use code, let's say, as for this instance, it doesn't come into effect for 30 days after that. And so our prior land use code was not very restrictive. And then we wanted to become, let's just say, more sophisticated and with the times, and we updated our land use code. This application was received before our land use code edits were approved, the most recent ones, and put into place. And so they fall into our old land use code. And what that means is that prior to receiving the application for this oil and gas development, the shores on Plum Creek came in. And we have homes, I believe they're 250 feet away from this location. However, if we fast forwarded to today and we received this application, we would not allow homes to be built within 500 feet of this active location based off of the number of wells. We have a sliding scale on the distances for the reverse setbacks. However, it contemplates like 1 to 4 wells and then jumps up from there all the way to 15 wells on a pad. And this is much greater than 15 wells, but that's kind of where we cap it off in the current code. So the reverse setback distance would be approximately twice the distance that you see here today.
And
does that, sorry.
And just for a little bit more clarity, this has not actually been officially approved yet. It's a preliminary plat. They are approved to continue on with the regulations that were in place at the time of their submittal, but it hasn't been formally approved yet.
Okay, and it's a preliminary plat in a two-step process. So preliminary has been approved, and so now it goes to final, and that's where it's sitting right now.
That's correct.
Yes.
Good. Thanks for that. And nothing has been built here then. So this is all still in the planning stages.
It's still in the planning stages, but we do have signed and approved by the elected officials the preliminary plat and the preliminary development plan, which, typically means that this could be reasonably foreseen in the future with some minor alterations.
Yeah, typically, and maybe it's the same with Frederick, but what I've seen is that once the preliminary plan gets approved, the finals are really just dotting the I's and crossing the T's. It's not it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that it will move forward, correct?
Yes, if there's significant changes, then they would essentially have to start the process over again, which is not necessarily in their benefit because of the new regulations. So I would assume that they will continue down this path.
Okay. And if you don't know this, that's fine, but you had mentioned this pond, Mila's Pond.
Sure.
And this has to do with Frederick. This doesn't have to do with Frederick. It has to do with Erie. Your perspective on it, and if you don't know that, that's fine.
Okay, so I think Mila's Pond is one water feature, but I think you may be referring to the large water feature on the left side of the screen that's cut off, and that's called Philly Lake, Philly with an F.
Okay.
And so there was plans for Erie to install groundwater extraction wells around Philly Lake for municipal supply. And we're not incredibly involved in that process. I don't think that in the end it was feasible. However, I'll leave that if Crestone wants to talk about that plan.
That one's not even in your jurisdiction, right?
Well, it is because that is Frederick, but Erie had water rights in that area, and they also have like I believe a water treatment plant that's not too far away from Philly Lake, in outside of our jurisdiction. However, Philly Lake is within our jurisdiction.
Okay, but when you talk about whatever the variance process that they're going to be required to go through in your land use process, it is because of Mila's Pond or because of Philly Lake?
It's
Or
because of
the
Philly Lake.
petition?
It's because of Philly Lake, and I'm just gonna say at this point in time, I'd like to either kick it over to Matt or Jason, if they feel comfortable providing additional
And I don't
information
need
there.
to know specifics about your variance process or that. I was just kind of curious about which water body was the one that was being asked from a variance from, right?
It's gonna be Philly Lake, yes,
Okay. Thanks for that.
of course.
And I think you made a statement that at least without the variances, that this application, at least in your process, does not meet your land use regulations. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thanks. I don't think I have any other questions.
Further questions for the panel? Commissioner Oath?
Thank you. Just a couple more questions around the noise discussion, and wanting to understand a little bit more the maybe intersection or not between the proposed COA and the part of your discussion that talked about cumulative noise limits and kind of the existing noise coming from the existing pad. So I guess I'll start with, does the proposed COA, is particularly in the concluding slide, you said, and if necessary, adjusted cumulative noise limits, but is that would be based on what the ambient noise levels are in the updated survey, not adjusted based on what's coming from the pad. Is that right?
Yeah, we would like to take a noise survey that works on trying to preclude some of that noise that's already coming from the pad. The only real noise source in the area is wind or Highway 52. We recognize that Highway 52 has some traffic certainly during the day, but almost none at night, and would just like to have some real a noise survey that is reflective of the reality on the ground. And the way to do that is we're going to have two noise surveys done, one on behalf of the town of Frederick, one Crestone, and those two companies are going to work together to try to work out, what is the reality on the ground. Right now, as I mentioned, we've got different noise surveys from Crestone's existing consultant that they did for Frederick. They're, vastly different than what you have before you in your file.
Okay. So are you saying that in the updated or the forthcoming surveys, the intent is to conduct them when operations at the existing pad are not operating or something?
What we're hoping to do is either that, to have things shut down for a while so we can, test that noise. There's also a way to, and this is well over my skis, but to actually do a survey near that pad to be able to understand the noise coming from that pad and then be able to offset those levels and to determine what the noise would be without the pad present. There's also a way to choose locations to take the noise study that would be well away from that pad to ensure that the pad isn't a contributing factor.
Okay. So you're proposing and maybe have come to an agreement with Crestone to come up with an approach for this, but you're not necessarily asking this commission to basically subtract the noise levels coming from the existing pad.
I'm not asking you to do that today. I think that good policy, it would be important for, if you're looking at an application for a pad expansion, to not have that existing pad be the baseline, because that would artificially raise the ambient noise level that you're approving. For example, if you had, as I mentioned, if that existing pad was already at 56 decibels during the day, they're already exceeding the residential noise level. All they would have to do is add an additional well, and then they could say, look, the existing ambient noise is at 56. Now we get to go up to 63.
Yeah. No, I understand where you're coming from on that. And since you're not asking us to do that here, today in our action, this is somewhat of a theoretical conversation, but as I was thinking about that and understanding where you're coming from, but then I was looking at the rules and the statement of basis and purpose, and I guess, it seems to contemplate this scenario, and there's no language in the statement of basis or in the regulation that would give us a basis to kind of deduct or subtract that. So I was trying to understand if that's what you were asking, and if so, kind of what in the rules or the statement of basis and purpose, would support that kind of an action. But again, this is a bit of a theoretical question. You're welcome to respond, but not necessary to.
Well, I do agree with what you're saying, and it wasn't something that was contemplated in the rulemaking, having been involved in that. But it is an issue that has come up more than once.
Okay.
And it is something that, as we see an infill, and the existing pads are going to be probably the best locations for some of that infill. This might come up more and more. And, if you're going to do an ambient noise study, it can't include. It just doesn't make sense to include the existing noise coming from the existing pad.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks. That's all I had.
Further questions for the panel? All right. I'd like to elevate Ben Frizzell from our ECMC staff to comment upon the proposed COA. Kind of want to address that issue at this point in time while we still got Frederick with us. So, Hearings Manager Thomas, could we do that?
Yes, Mr. Frizzell has been elevated.
Good morning, Mr. Frizzell. Have you been tracking the conversation, and have you seen the proposal with regard to a COA for noise? And do you have any comments about that or edits to it?
Good morning, Commission, and thank you for elevating me. Like Commissioner Robbins said, my name is Ben Frizzell, and I am the Planning Permitting Manager for ECMC. Staff has discussed this issue with the parties, and staff has some COA language that staff thinks covers the Frederick Crestone proposing what they're proposing, while also being something that complies with how noise studies are required to be conducted by ECMC and that ECMC staff can actually enforce. So I'd like to read into the record a proposed COA for your consideration. Prior to the commencement of construction, the operator will submit via Form 4 sundry notice and obtain approval of an updated noise mitigation plan that includes one, the ambient noise survey used to modify allowable noise levels for both A scale and C scale noise through Rule 423D, which will be conducted jointly by Crestone and the town of Frederick. Two, a BMP that specifies the noise limits that are adjusted based on ambient noise levels through Rule 423D. This is to be provided for any individual noise point of compliance with an adjusted noise limit. That's all I have right now, Commissioner. I'm happy to answer any questions, and we're happy to elevate other staff that might have a little bit more expertise with noise-related issues.
Okay, thank you for that. So, some slight amendments to the COA as proposed by Mr. Sura. Is there a way we can get that language to Mr. Sura and to Mr. McGee so that they can read it as opposed to trying to digest it from an oral presentation?
Absolutely. I'll work with our AAG on that.
Okay, thanks. Does anyone have... Go ahead.
I was just saying thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Do any of the commissioners have questions for Mr. Frizzell? All right. So we'll get that language around to the parties. And with that, Mr. Sura and Mr. Aronoff, we'll let you go, but stick around. We may have further questions for you after and or when we hear from the applicant.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. McGee, I believe you're up next with your client.
Thank you, Chair. Laura, can we start the presentation? Well, good morning, Commissioners, ECM staff, and members of the public. Again, my name is Ryan McKee, and I'm a shareholder with Beatty & Wozniak. And with my colleague, Melinda Moraine, we represent Crestone Peak Resources Operating, LLC, and docket number 240600157, which is an application for the approval of the file Oil and Gas Development Plan. Joining me today to present this application is Caleb Roush. We will also have a panel of subject matter experts joining us today to answer your questions following today's presentation. Initially, Crestone would like to thank the town for its participation in today's hearing and its continued collaboration on the file OGDP. As the town has just outlined, Crestone has worked diligently and collaboratively with both the town and the ECMC through the file OGDP concurrent permitting process Crestone has sought under ECMC Rule 301 F2. As reflected in the record, the proposed file OGDP and all associated plans, including the current noise mitigation plan, were thoroughly reviewed by the director and determined to comply with ECMC rules. Based on that review, the director had the application before you today was recommended for approval by the director. However, while the ECMC review process was ongoing, as the town mentioned, Crestone has continued to engage with the town's multi-layered review process for its conditional use permit. One area where this collaboration and an evolving process is particularly evident is the noise mitigation plan. So in coordination with the town, Crestone has committed to conducting the additional noise, ambient noise survey, similar to that contemplated by Rule 423B. To support the approval of the required variance from the town, the study is designed to address the specific acoustic conditions and ambient levels that currently exist at the proposed file pad and in the surrounding area. Because Crestone and the town have agreed to conduct the new ambient noise survey, which will provide the most recent ambient noise data for the file location, Crestone and the town have agreed to jointly request the COA that the town presented to you. And we are happy to review the revised language presented by staff just now. Although the noise and mitigation plan for the file OGDP complies with the Rule 423, as evidenced by the issuance of the director's recommendation, Crestone is willing to agree to the town's requested update to the ECMC noise mitigation plan with the most recent data that will be obtained through the new ambient noise survey. In addition to the requested COA, Crestone has also committed to install permanent production phase sound walls around agreed upon equipment. This commitment goes beyond what is required by ECMC rules and increases the file pad's overall protection to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. In addition to the above noise considerations, as the town referenced, as part of Crestone's conditional use application, Crestone has also requested 3 variances from the town's land use code requirements. One of these variances relates to compliance with the Frederick's unique noise standards that do not include the allowance for ambient noise. And because of the elevated ambient noise levels in the area surrounding the file pad, much of which pursuant to Crestone studies have been attributable to Highway 52 traffic as well as air traffic from surrounding airports and flight patterns, it is impossible for Crestone to meet the town's limits without the requested variance. As reflected in the COA requested today, Crestone is undertaking a robust and collaborative effort with the town to ensure its proposed variants to the ambient noise standards are protective of both current and future residents around the file pad, in addition to providing additional noise mitigation upgrades to the file pad which exceed ECMC requirements. The other 2 town variances requests have been dictated by Crestone's proposed use of an existing location and the implementation of the town's new oil and gas regulations midway through Crestone's planning process. However, in each instance, Crestone has worked with the town to ensure its variance requests align with the town's overall regulatory framework and goals, and in each instance, the town's variance will result in standards that exceed ECMC requirements if approved. As to the variance related to the proximity of 1 RBU to the file pad, as the town noted in its pre-hearing statement filed with the ECMC, if Crestone's CUP application were submitted today, this variance would not be necessary because the town has subsequently modified its land use code to allow for the proximity of this RBU if informed consent was obtained, which it has been. Further, Crestone has reached an agreement with the RBU owner and the tenant to allow for this structure to be unoccupied during pre-production activities. As to the variance relating to the file pad's proximity to Philly Lake, Crestone is engaged with both the town of Frederick and the town of Erie regarding Philly Lake and has reached water monitoring agreements with each entity to address their concerns related to the proximity of the proposed pad to Philly Lake. Additionally, as will be further discussed, CDPHE requested a continuance of this matter to consult with multiple entities and consulting agencies, including Crestone and both towns of Frederick and Erie. And following those consultations, CDPHE endorsed Crestone's proposed BMPs and water monitoring plans. In addition to the ongoing engagement with the town related to its CUP process, as you will hear about in more detail, the proposed file OGDP is the result of a multi-year planning process by Crestone that relied on an extensive engagement and input from the surface owner, CDPHE, and the town of Erie, approximate local government. Crestone also engaged with the greater community at large through the community meetings and extensive outreach efforts to both nearby residents and business owners. These engagements have allowed Crestone to present an OGDP application that it believes is most protective and least impactful to both current and future residents in the area. As you will note, Crestone filed this application with the ECMC in June of 2024, and as a result, this application is not subject to the recent cumulative impact rules or certain additional requirements related to disproportionately impacted communities. The file OGDP proposes to utilize 1 existing location, the file 32H K268 pad, within the town of Frederick for mineral development of over 3,700 acres from 6 surrounding DSUs through 28 new horizontal wells targeting the Niobrara and Codell formations. The use of the existing file pad allows for the proposed mineral development of over 3,700 acres through only a 1.6 acre expansion of the existing file pad following interim reclamation. Crestone is able to commit to the electrification of all production equipment through existing highline utility power that was recently added by Crestone in anticipation of the file OGDP. This upgraded electrical infrastructure will also allow for the use of utility power electric drill rigs, which will drastically reduce air emissions. Also, because the file pad is an existing location, the proposed file development will utilize the existing three-phase pipeline takeaway for all oil, gas, and water, which will not only eliminate thousands of truck trips, significantly reducing both air emissions and traffic concerns, but because the infrastructure is already in place for the existing file pad, nearby residents and businesses will not be impacted by the construction of this additional beneficial infrastructure. Importantly, it is not just the proposed new development at the file pad that will benefit from the proposed BMPs. These numerous beneficial BMPs will also be implemented for the existing operations at the file pad, allowing for existing operations to be less impactful and more protective of current and future residents. These beneficial impacts include not only updates to the existing equipment and monitoring systems at the existing pad, but will also include the removal of legacy pump jacks at the file pad and a commitment by Crestone to conduct off-site sound and water monitoring as part of its new proposed operations. The existing file pad is located within 2,000 feet of 4 RBUs, with all RBU owners and tenants having signed informed consents. Further, as I previously mentioned, Crestone has confirmed with the owner and the tenant of the nearest RBU that it will remain unoccupied during pre-production activities. The file OGDP has also been designed to accommodate the surface owner's proposed additional land use plans in coordination with the town. This coordination has been completed to ensure that the development in the areas surrounding the existing file pad proceeds in a manner that is thoughtful and minimizes impacts and maximizes protections to both current and future residents. This includes the implementation of a development timeline that allows for all pre-production activities to be completed before homes within the new proposed development are occupied. The file OGDP complies with all substantive and procedural requirements of the ECMC rules. And again, the director has reviewed all elements of the file OGDP and has recommended approval pursuant to Rule 306B1, finding that the file OGDP complies with all requirements of the ECMC rules and, in the director's judgment, protects and minimizes adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. I will now turn the presentation over to Mr. Roush.
Thank you, Mr. McKee, and good morning, commissioners. My name is Caleb Roush, and I'm an asset development engineer with Crestone Peak Resources. Joining me today are several folks who will also be available for questions. Next slide for me.
Sorry, Caleb, I'm struggling to control the slides for some reason.
No problem. I'll pause for just a second.
Okay. Here we go.
Perfect. Thank you. Again, joining me today are several folks who will also be available for questions. In addition to Ryan, we have Jeff Annable, our manager of well and location permitting, Aaron Schlabau, our air quality advisor, Mary Yeast, our mineral landman, and Bob Bresnahan, our surface landman on this project. Here's how I'll organize today's discussion. Our presentation will begin with a high-level overview of the project and then move into the specifics. I'll start by laying the foundation for the proposed reoccupation through the alternative location analysis. From there, I'll outline our comprehensive best management practices, highlight the project's beneficial impacts, and walk through the proposed timeline. I'll conclude with a comprehensive review of our local government and community engagement efforts, followed by a brief summary and a request for approval. With this in mind, let's take a look at the OGDP itself. The file OGDP is an expansion of an existing location, the file 32H-K268 pad. It is situated in the northeast quarter of the southeast quarter of section 32 to north 68 west. The relevant local government is the town of Frederick, and the proximate local governments are the towns of Erie, and Weld County. This proposal provides for the development of up to 28 new horizontal wells across 6 proposed drilling spacing units, allowing for about 3,744 acres of mineral development. The disturbed area during construction is 12.46 acres, which will be reduced to 5.21 acres after interim reclamation. An interesting note is that this is more than a quarter acre smaller than the current allowed interim reclamation area on the currently active Form 2A. A major benefit is that the planned development enables 18 existing wells to be plugged and abandoned and 8 existing locations to be reclaimed. Some of this work has already begun in earnest to fulfill our other agreements necessary for responsible development on the file pad. To help mitigate impacts that may be associated with the file pad's proximity to these receptors, Crestone has designed a comprehensive and extensive suite of BMPs that include using an electrified drilling rig with Group 3 drilling mud, utilizing Tier 4 or equivalent engines for completions, and adopting a design that features existing oil, gas, and produced water pipeline takeaway, pressurized vessels for all 3 phases, that is a tankless design, and fully electrified production equipment. The existing location triggers 3 Rule 304B2B criteria, including proximity to RBUs in a DIC and is upgradient relative to a riparian corridor, which is precisely why our siting, containment, and monitoring measures are so robust. Now, let me situate this in time. What's happened so far to get us here today? The existing file pad began production in 2018. The local government application process for the proposed expansion formally began in July of 2022, when Crestone submitted its initial application materials and associated fees to the town of Frederick. Later in 2022, continued work on the conditional use permit, or CUP, was paused for approximately a year and a half at the town's request so that Crestone could first proceed through the OGDP process. During that period, work on the CUP did not advance. However, Crestone continued active planning, technical evaluation, and coordination with relevant agencies to optimize the proposed development. That effort ultimately resulted in a refined proposal that's before you today. 6 DSUs with a reduced well count from the originally planned 35 to 28, reflecting both technical optimization and responsiveness to anticipated community and environmental considerations. In January of 2024, Crestone provided an OGDP pre-application notice to the town of Frederick, the town of Erie, and Weld County, and formally filed the OGDP with the ECMC in June, followed by amendments in December and May 2025 to incorporate additional technical details and to address agency feedback as they became available through the ECMC review process. It's also worth noting that Frederick undertook a moratorium during 2024, from April through November, to update its oil and gas regulations in its land use code. The 2025 portion of the timeline reflects substantial collaboration among Crestone, the relevant local government, and many consulting agencies. The original hearing date was first moved from August to October of last year at CDPHE's request to allow additional consultation with DWR, the town of Erie, and Crestone regarding the Philly Lake wells. On September 24th, CDPHE issued written comments concluding that the Philly Lake wells do not constitute a reasonably foreseeable public water system and approved additional proactive BMPs for the file pad, all of which have been incorporated into Crestone's plans. We'll come back to this in a bit. As coordination with the town of Frederick continued, particularly with respect to the town's ongoing CUP process, Crestone and the town jointly agreed to move the ECMC hearing to December 10th and subsequently to today's date to ensure the town had sufficient time to continue its land use review. To date, Crestone has completed 3 full review cycles of the CUP application. The director's recommendation for approval of the file OGDP pad was also issued on November 19th of last year. After years of agency review, municipal coordination, and technical refinement, the focus appropriately turns to our first decision, siting, where the alternative location analysis demonstrates that the existing file pad is not simply preferable, but the objectively best location that satisfies ECMC standards while avoiding greater impacts. The proposed pad site is the least impactful for several reasons. It reuses an existing pad, minimizing new surface disturbance and leveraging existing three-phase takeaway. Its central siting maximizes mineral development, avoiding the need for multiple new pads, while fully avoiding wetlands, high-priority habitats, and high-occupancy receptors. All 4 RBUs within 2,000 feet have also provided informed consent. Using the same criteria applied by staff and required under ECMC rules, the next 4 slides methodically narrow the alternatives, demonstrating why each was eliminated and why the file pad ultimately emerges as the most optimal location. We'll start by eliminating alternatives that fall short in terms of proximity to highly sensitive receptors and RBU intensity. The staff requested alternative would place more than 200 residential building units within 2,000 feet, including 3 school properties within 1 mile, and still failed to access the full mineral development from a single pad, requiring multiple new locations and duplicative infrastructure. For those reasons, it would have introduced substantially greater impacts and was eliminated prior to the OGDP submission. Locations 1 and 4 present similar issues. Both would place well over 100 residential units within the 2,000-foot buffer, with location 1 also encroaching on a school setback. Neither alternative can develop the full proposed mineral development from a single site, meaning additional pads, facilities, and midstream infrastructure would be required, both noted in purple italics throughout this portion. When evaluated against objective ECMC siting criteria, these alternatives do not reduce impacts relative to the file location alone. They materially increase them and are appropriately eliminated from consideration. The remaining alternatives are eliminated due to clear environmental and land use conflicts. Location 2 is disqualified because it directly overlaps mapped wetlands and lies within a 100-year floodplain. It is also historically overlapped with a bald eagle roost buffer and would require a full build-out of new facilities and midstream infrastructure, thereby introducing substantially greater environmental disturbance and risk. Location 5 is an expansion of existing facility and pad sites, but is restricted by conservation easements that prohibit off-lease oil and gas development. It also cannot develop the full proposed mineral acreage from a single location, necessitating additional pads elsewhere. Location 3, selected due to its avoidance of RBUs, is eliminated outright because oil and gas development is not permitted on Boulder County open space. Even setting that aside, it would still fail to develop minerals from one site and would require redundant infrastructure. In each case, these alternatives were eliminated by stringent constraints related to wildlife protections, floodplain and wetland impacts, and land use prohibitions. Before moving to conclude the alternative location analysis, I want to highlight our comprehensive evaluation of the area to determine whether there were any other reasonable sites beyond those formally analyzed and included in the OGDP, or whether the proposed development, the proposed DSUs, could be developed with multiple pads rather than a single location. That analysis leads to the same result. The surrounding area is constrained by a patchwork of dedicated open space, conservation easements, agricultural lands, wetlands, floodplains, and existing residential density. The remaining areas either lack sufficient space to safely design and construct a compliant pad, are proximate to significantly more residential receptors and water features, or would not provide access to any meaningful portion of the minerals. Importantly, pursuing multiple pad locations would substantially increase impacts rather than reduce them. It would require duplicative surface disturbances, new access roads, additional facilities, and new midstream infrastructure, magnifying air, noise, visual, and land use impacts across the area. The outcome would directly conflict with the avoid, minimize, mitigate framework and the directive to reduce cumulative impacts where feasible. Taken together, this analysis shows that each alternative location is eliminated for clear objective reasons, whether due to proximity to residences and schools, as shown in columns 1 and 2, environmental and wildlife constraints, see columns 3 and 4, land use prohibitions, or the need for multiple pads and duplicative infrastructure. The file 32HK268 pad stands out as the location that avoids greater impacts while fully developing the proposed minerals, making it the clear and logical outcome of this alternative location analysis. Because of this existing pad's location, Crestone has gone beyond baseline requirements in our OGDP. I'll now outline the cumulative impact mitigation measures and best management practices designed to protect public health, water resources, and nearby residents. Our mitigation beam suite is built into siting, construction, drilling, completions, and production. I'll step through the highlights that reduce impacts, enhance monitoring, and make the existing file pad more protective of incoming neighboring development. In location siting and during construction, we avoid impacts by ensuring the location is sited outside of high priority habitats and by confirming that no designated outdoor activity areas, schools, or childcare centers are within 1 mile of the working pad surface. To minimize impacts, we only have 4 RBUs within 2,000 feet, and all have signed informed consent. The nearest RBU, as you've heard from before, 389 feet away and owned by the same surface owner as the pad, will be unoccupied during pre-production operations. We utilize the existing pad and access point and leverage existing oil, gas, and produced water pipeline takeaway. To mitigate construction impacts, we will use fresh water on the access road to minimize dust. Topsoil stockpiles will also be constructed with slopes no greater than 4:1 and stabilized with appropriate vegetation to prevent erosion. During the drilling phase, we minimize air emissions by using a utility-powered electric drilling rig. We also commit to using IOGP Group 3 drilling mud, which reduces odor and has low aromatic content. To mitigate impacts, we will install 32-foot sound walls around the drilling area before starting drilling operations. Pipe cleaning procedures will be employed during drill string removal, and a closed-loop pitless fluid management system will be used. A polyethylene liner will be placed on site as an additional spill prevention measure. Trucks carrying drill cuttings will be covered. Additionally, traffic is planned using only right-hand turns and separate pad entry and exit routes to enhance safety and flow. This route is the same as used during the initial occupation of the file pad. Finally, all drilling activities are planned to occur prior to the construction and occupancy of new residential development, avoiding impacts to future residents. For completions, we minimize truck traffic by installing temporary lay-flat water lines to transport fresh water to the location. We utilize a quiet completions fleet featuring Tier 4 or equivalent engines and advanced enclosures and sound dampening technologies that minimize noise pollution. Flowback will be routed through permanent production facilities. To mitigate dust, sand will be stored and transported in sealed containers. We commit to using block and isolate practices where possible. Any gas encountered during flowback will be routed to a gas sales pipeline or combusted with a minimum destruction efficiency of 98%. We will also continue to utilize the 32-foot sound walls. And finally, like the drilling phase, completions are sequenced to occur before nearby residential development, aligning oil and gas operations with broader land use planning and development timelines. During the production phase, we minimize impacts by utilizing the existing 3-phase pipeline takeaway for oil, gas, and produced water, which reduces truck traffic and air emissions. We adopt a tankless location design using only pressurized vessels, and we'll use a pressurized maintenance vessel during maintenance operations to eliminate all vented gas. We commit to electrifying all permanent production facilities. The updated facility uses a bulk separator 3-phase meter system, which reduces the number of separators needed and effectively halves production-related emissions, which were already small with the tankless design. To mitigate risks, facilities are equipped with SCADA for remote shut-in capability. Equipment will be painted desert tan or similar to blend into the landscape. We are implementing real-time 24/7 continuous leak detection monitoring and also plan to continuously monitor noise for 2 years after the first date of production at the request of the town of Frederick. Crestone's file OGDP is a reoccupation near sensitive water receptors, including Philly Lake. Both the town of Erie and the town of Frederick have requested, and Crestone has agreed to, additional voluntary source water protections. The OGDP already included many engineered containment measures, such as polyethylene liners during drilling and completions, as well as durable containment systems for production facilities with polyurea liners. Crestone will utilize continuous real-time thermal imaging to detect potential leaks. This protection is enhanced by our tankless infrastructure, which ensures all production fluids are contained in pipelines and pressurized vessels, not open tanks, minimizing spill risk. In addition, having collaborated closely with the towns of Erie and Frederick, Crestone is voluntarily committed to installing 4 dedicated water monitoring wells before drilling operations begin. Crestone will conduct further baseline water quality testing per ECMC Rule 615E. All testing data from these new monitoring wells will be provided to the towns of Erie and Frederick within 30 days of receipt. A stringent spill response protocol is also in place with both the relevant and proximal governments. If a spill occurs outside containment, the towns will be notified within 8 hours. Testing will then increase to semi-weekly for at least 2 months. Routine monitoring, including monthly and quarterly testing, will follow ECMC standards and our agreements with the municipalities if the Philly Lake wells become a reasonably foreseeable public water source. These protections have been reviewed and endorsed by CDPHE as sufficiently protective. Sound is a key consideration for development in your residential areas and within disproportionately impacted communities. And Crestone's sound plan for the file location is designed to be conservative, verifiable, and adaptive. As submitted, the project complies fully with ECMC Rule 423, where the existing acoustic environment already exceeds land use thresholds. The Commission's Ambient Plus standard under Rule 423 D2 appropriately applies, with the important safeguard that cumulative noise can never exceed the rule's absolute maximum limit. Noise management at this site is not treated as a one-time modeling exercise. Crestone completed and reviewed multiple baseline sound studies to characterize the pre-existing soundscape and establish site-specific allowables at both the Town of Frederick's points of compliance and the ECMC's, which I'd like to note are not the same, and is one of the reasons why the sound study results are expectedly different. These results are generally consistent with historic data, as noted on the slide, from before the original pad development. Studies taken at different points in time will logically yield different results. If needed, ECMC and the Town of Frederick Code both require further mitigation to maintain compliance. During construction, drilling, and completions, Crestone will deploy 6 continuous real-time sound monitors around the location to provide 24/7 verification of compliance. From a design standpoint, the site incorporates best-in-class controls, including electrified drilling, quiet completions, and both temporary and now permanent sound walls as requested by the Town of Frederick. Importantly, this is an adaptive program. If monitored sound levels approach allowables, operations will be modified or additional mitigation implemented. At the Town of Frederick's request, Crestone has committed to 2 years of continuous monitoring during production, extending accountability well beyond rule requirements. I'd like to take a moment to address the DL Adams acoustic review as mentioned in prior testimony. As Crestone, ENRG, the Town of Frederick, and DL Adams have sat down and addressed those findings in person. ENRG has conducted many sound studies, including this one for file, that have been thoroughly reviewed by staff and found to be consistent with industry standards. Wind was appropriately excluded over 5 miles per hour, not 25 miles per hour per the review, in line with ECMC Rule 423C3. Including wind above that threshold would have resulted in higher allowable asks that would have been less protective. Secondly, there is no requirement for characterization of traffic in ECMC rules. Traffic is a part of the measurement of ambient sounds, which are measured from the points of compliance as a standard practice. Regarding the equipment used, photos of the instruments as set up on the location were included in our NMP for the town's review and were set up correctly. In fact, ENRG uses Type 1 meters better than the Type 2 as prescribed by ECMC rules. Per the device's manufacturer, the meters require calibration only once per year, and ENRG standard practices calibrate the meters at least once a month, 12 times the minimum. Nevertheless, Crestone has agreed to request a COA to conduct a joint ambient survey to maximize our collaboration with the town and our commitment to transparency. To formalize those commitments, in the effort to upgrade the file pad as a part of this OGDP, Crestone is jointly requesting this sound COA alongside the director recommended noise mitigation plan. The purpose is straightforward. Noise compliance is fundamentally based on ambient conditions, and conditions at any site might change over time. This COA commits us to upgrade the ambient baseline so that future compliance is measured against current conditions while remaining fully consistent with ECMC Rule 423. Importantly, this does not relax any standards or reduce enforceability. It simply aligns the state and local frameworks as much as practicable, provides additional clarity for all parties going forward, and ensures that noise mitigation continues to be grounded in accurate site-specific data. Put another way, the ambient noise study is being conducted to ensure that the OGDP's NMP is based on the most accurate and current data available, and to ensure that both ECMC and Town of Frederick noise standards are based on a consistent baseline. What we're asking the Commission to approve today is a staff-reviewed, director-recommended noise plan, along with a jointly requested COA that strengthens coordination and accountability in this concurrent permitting process. Having outlined how impacts are avoided, minimized, and mitigated, I'll now turn to the project's net beneficial impacts and the anticipated development timeline recognizing that timing remains subject to further review and approval. This project offers substantial beneficial impacts, allowing for the consolidation and reclamation of existing infrastructure. Specifically, we are undertaking to plug and abandon 18 existing wells and to reclaim 8 existing locations. This includes the removal of 8 oil tanks and 3 produced water tanks, resulting in the reclamation of 3.14 acres of disturbed land by closing existing locations and reducing VOC emissions by about 33 tons per year. These sites are within 4,000 feet of 1,352 RBUs in or adjacent to DIC boundaries. Transparently, to fulfill our commitments to our neighbors and to meet our operational deadlines this year, some of this work has already begun. Since this OGDP does not introduce a new oil and gas site into an undeveloped area, I want to emphasize that it is a significant upgrade to an existing 8-year-old pad to better prepare it for new neighbors and shifting land uses around it by re-highlighting a couple of BMPs to that end. Through this OGDP, the existing file pad will be modernized with enhanced groundwater protections, including the previously detailed 4 monitoring wells to be installed before drilling begins, providing a level of proactive water oversight that does not exist at this site should any nearby water sectors become reasonably foreseeable public water sources in the future. We're also committing to 2 years of continuous sound monitoring, providing transparency and accountability well beyond standard requirements and allowing real-time verification of compliance once production begins. In addition, continuous leak detection and monitoring technology, paired with permanent sound walls around compressors, significantly improve both environmental and quality of life protections compared to historic operations. Taken together, these measures transform an existing facility into a truly best-in-class modernized site, specifically designed to coexist with nearby and future residential development. This OGDP delivers a net upgrade, safer and more protective for the community for the next 3 decades or so. With those beneficial impacts in mind and site upgrades, I'll now briefly walk through the anticipated development timeline. I want to emphasize that this plan is not mandated or fixed. All development activity is fully contingent upon the town of Frederick's approval, regardless of ECMC's actions today. Ideally, to undertake the full plan, construction activities would begin in the second quarter of this year, followed by drilling later in quarters 2 and 3. Completion operations would occur in the later half of the year, with interim reclamation targeted for the end of the second quarter of 2027. Our SUA obligation to bring all wells on by July of 2027 matters primarily because it is tightly coordinated with the surface owner's planned residential development. These 2 projects have many synergies we aim to leverage. Also, the SUA ensures that pre-production operations will finish before any homes are occupied, and that future residents will need to positively affirm their awareness that oil and gas is nearby. Even after OGDP approval, Crestone must still complete additional permanent level submissions and reviews, including Form 2s, which can take months to review and approve, and other compliance needs with any other site-specific conditions and necessary filings, all of which occur over time. We view ECMC approval today as providing regulatory certainty, while the town's review determines if and when development proceeds, adding further detail and protection far beyond the ECMC mandates as you've seen. We are committed to adjusting the timeline based on town feedback and conditions. Up to this point, I've walked through technical design, mitigation, and the anticipated timing of the project. Equally important, however, is how this proposal has been developed through sustained engagement with the public and local governments. The next few slides focus on our outreach efforts, how we engage neighboring residents, local governments, and other stakeholders early and continuously, and how that feedback directly informed both the project design and the protections you've already seen. First, with respect to neighboring residences and businesses, 2 neighborhood meetings have been held, the most relevant being on April 18th of 2025. Project information has also been continuously available through a dedicated public website. Given the proximity of Anderson Farms, we've also made direct engagement with their team. Most importantly, every residential building unit within 2,000 feet of the pad, as defined by ECMC rule, owners and tenants, have signed informed consent. Outreach has not been limited to these folks, however, as we've also consulted with a business located about 1,000 feet south of the pad at the behest of the town of Frederick, which has no issues with our proposed plans and operations. Second, with the town of Erie, outreach began well in advance of this hearing and focused primarily on Philly Lake and the surrounding wells. We met with Erie 8 times between September of 2024 and September of 2025 and worked collaboratively toward a technical agreement. That process resulted in a fully executed Philly Lake well agreement in December of 2025. Finally, engagement with the town of Frederick has been ongoing and multifaceted. In addition to the CUP process, we've worked closely with town staff on many nuanced and layered issues. Many of the added protections you've seen today, particularly around water monitoring and noise, are direct results of that coordination. This slide further illustrates our multi-year coordination with the town of Frederick and the evolution of the local review process in conjunction with the OGDP. In 2022, the town requested that the conditional use permit be filed after the OGDP had been reviewed. In response, Crestone first focused on optimizing the development plan and advancing the OGDP so that the town could, with confidence, evaluate the full scope of proposed impacts, mitigation measures, and alternatives before proceeding with the CUP. This reduced our well count and refined our DSU boundaries, and we prepared for CUP submission in early 2024. During this period, the town adopted an oil and gas moratorium ahead of a scheduled pre-application meeting. Formal CUP processing was then paused during the moratorium, but coordination continued, and following its conclusion, the project moved forward under the town's updated code. From late 2024 through 2025 and into this year, collaboration has focused on remaining discretionary items, such as sound-related mitigation options, civil construction sequencing, parcel planning, and drafting a joint development agreement that includes the service owner to best account for the planned surrounding residential land use. Throughout this period, Crestone has maintained regular, often bi-weekly check-ins with town staff and has continued to adapt the project to address local priorities. The key point is that the OGDP before you today reflects the sequencing the town has requested and years of sustained coordination. Crestone recognizes that town approval is required for the proposed reoccupation of the existing file pad, regardless of ECMC approval. Our work with Frederick is ongoing, and we remain committed to proactive engagement to secure approval through their Planning Commission and subsequently their Board of Trustees. Given that the pile pad exists and the expected incoming development, Crestone believes there should be no material changes requiring another appearance before this commission, especially against the backdrop of the director's recommendation and 3 full reviews of our CUP application. Any changes that might require a modification of the OGDP should be appropriately handled by Sundry Form 4s as a part of the concurrent permitting process. As we close today, the intent of the following slide is to bring together the core themes you've heard throughout today's presentation. Starting with public health and safety. In addition to having obtained all required informed consent, there are no schools, childcare centers, or high occupancy buildings within 1 mile, and the nearest residence, owned by the surface owner, will be vacant during pre-production operations. With respect to relevant and proximal local governments, Crestone has worked collaboratively with both the town of Erie and the town of Frederick. That coordination resulted in the execution of a Philly Lake well agreement with Erie and ongoing engagement with Frederick on outstanding items. Importantly, these measures add protections beyond state minimums, such as our requested noise mitigation plan COA, rather than substituting for them. Furthermore, this project reflects the outcome of a robust alternative location analysis. The existing file pad is by far the best and most preferred location, avoiding wetlands, eagle roosts, schools, and open space conflicts while utilizing existing 3-phase takeaway infrastructure. Reoccupying an existing site avoids the disturbance, emissions, and cumulative impacts associated with developing new pads elsewhere, and provides protective upgrades that anticipate hypothetical water uses and imminent residential development. From an air, noise, and technology standpoints, the project incorporates best-in-class mitigations, utility-powered drilling and production, a tankless facility designed with pressurized vessels, 32-foot sound walls during drilling and completions, a quiet frac fleet, continuous emissions monitoring, and 2 years of continuous sound monitoring. The pad will add more landscaping and visual shielding, all within the same allowed footprint on the active Form 2A. Cumulative impacts are not only mitigated, some are reduced. This project removes 18 legacy wells and 8 tanks, resulting in an estimated net reduction of 33.82 tons per year in VOC emissions within a DIC. Taken together, these elements demonstrate that the file OGDP satisfies the Commission's avoid, minimize, mitigate framework and delivers an existing pad that is better equipped for the future. For these reasons, Crestone respectfully requests approval of the OGDP as recommended by the Director. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Roush. This marks the final slide in Crestone's presentation today. This slide summarizes the requested relief for the file OGDP. In addition, in conjunction with the town, Crestone is also requesting the Commission include a condition of approval requiring Crestone to submit an updated ambient noise survey as if one had been required by the Director pursuant to ECMC Rule 423B for both A-scale and C-scale noise. Crestone's agreement to submit the updated ambient noise data so that the ECMC noise mitigation plan will reflect the most accurate and current data is a great example of the thoughtful and engagement-minded approach Crestone has taken with the file OGDP, which has involved extensive engagement with nearby residents, local governments, ECMC, and CDPHE. As a result of these engagements, Crestone believes the file OGDP before you today not only meets the rules and requirements of the ECMC, but that it also contemplates and provides best-in-class BMPs that allow for the proposed development to be the least impactful to and most protective of current and future area residents. As the application and presentation today demonstrates, the file OGDP has been designed to avoid, mitigate, and minimize impacts to receptors through its thoughtful planning, including the use of an existing location and infrastructure that avoids the need for significant new construction disturbances, commitments to conduct both water and sound monitoring above and beyond any regulatory requirements, and the inclusion of best-in-class BMPs that further minimize and mitigate potential impacts. Importantly, it is not just the proposed new developments at the file pad that will benefit from the proposed BMPs. These numerous beneficial BMPs will also be implemented at the existing file pad, allowing for the existing operations to be less impactful to and more protective of current and future area residents. Also, through a specific notice requirements and operational development timing agreed to with the surface owner in consultation with the town of Frederick, Crestone's proposed operational timeline allows for all pre-production operations to be completed prior to the occupation of any residence, and that any prospective homebuyers will be well informed as to the operations at the file pad prior to any home purchase. Crestone has worked to ensure that the proposed file OGDP is not only protective and least impactful to its current neighbors, but also to its potential future neighbors as well. Lastly, as we previously mentioned, pursuant to the Director's recommendation, the file OGDP complies with all requirements of the Commission's rules and, in the Director's judgment, protects and minimizes adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. Based on this recommendation and the record before you today, Crestone asks that the Commission approve the file OGDP as presented today, including the proposed COA relating to Crestone's commitment to conduct an additional ambient noise survey and its submission to the ECMC. We want to thank the staff for its thoughtful technical review of this project and its Director's recommendation for approval. Finally, we'd like to thank you, Commissioners, for your attention to today's presentation materials. And this concludes our presentation, and the panel is now available for your questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. McGee, my understanding is that AG Boudreau forwarded to you staff's proposed COA. Just trying to see if you got that and if you had thoughts about it, just to kind of narrow that issue down.
We did receive it, so thank you, Mr. Boudreau, and Crestone is in agreement with the staff's proposal.
All right. Mr. Sura, are you still with us?
I am.
You should have gotten that as well. Do you have any concerns about the staff's proposal?
I would like at least 5 minutes to be able to discuss it with my client. We've been, watching the.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I just trying to figure out that issue first. So we'll let you go off, and then we're going to continue with questions for the applicant panel.
Okay, thank you.
All right, commissioners, questions. Commissioner Oath.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Mr. Roush, for your presentation. Been trying to think through or understand kind of how Crestone has been taking into account and thinking about the subdivision that has been discussed that's going to be in close proximity, and based on a number of items in your testimony around kind of the actions or approaches that Crestone had put forward in terms of avoiding, minimizing, and mitigating, and some of the other things. It appears that that not you, not personally, that Crestone also is thinking about this subdivision as kind of a foregone conclusion. Is that fair?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Commissioner Oath. That is a fair conclusion.
Okay. So with that in mind, you also mentioned a number of times that, you went through the CDPHE consultation process, but it doesn't talk about the subdivision at all. Rather, it's just focused on the existing RBUs. So would you say that at the time of consultation, it was contemplated that this subdivision was reasonably foreseeable?
I'm going to lean in on some support from Nathan Bennett if needed, but I would say yes, it was contemplated as a part of this application, which is why the BMPs as reviewed by CDPHE were included as they are. We did see that having worked with the surface owner who is also the developer, that those application materials were already submitted to the town of Frederick at the time.
So it was part of your discussions, or you're just because of the timing, you're assuming that it was contemplated by CDPHE during their consultation?
It was assumed that CDPHE had included that in their review, given the status of that application with the town of Frederick. Yes.
Okay, I appreciate
it. And yeah, sorry to add one thing. The town of Frederick was included in the CDPHE's consultation, so I would assume that that was a part of that discussion as well.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I will just say, I think for me anyways, it'll be important to just confirm that that was the case during that consultation process, that was the understanding.
Commissioner Oath, I believe Mr. Annable has some additional information to add.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add on, thank you, Commissioner Oath. In our consultation with Tessa, she was aware of the subdivision, and I think it is reflected in the second paragraph of her letter to the director. A housing subdivision is planned for the development less than 2,000 feet from the working pad surface, but is not foreseen to have any certificates of occupancy prior to completion of all proposed wells.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yep.
Commissioner Oath, do you want me to elevate Ms. Sorensen?
I would like to take another look at that. So let's just maybe put a pin in that for now. I appreciate it.
Okay. Commissioner Messner?
Thanks. Commissioner Oath, I didn't know if you had any other questions or not, so I don't mean to.
I don't. Please go ahead.
Okay. So kind of one kind of big overarching question here. While it's clear that you've been working with the town of Frederick in the review, it's also clear, at least from testimony today, that they've indicated that the application as presented doesn't meet their requirements. And so explain to me what the rush is to get a decision before this commission, before getting a decision at the local government level, understanding that the application as presented doesn't meet the local government's requirements without 3 variances. And you're going to waste a bunch of people's time if it doesn't make it through the local government process. And here we are trying to make it through our process and everything that we're doing here with potentially substantial changes to it if, variances aren't approved or adjustments get made and so on and so forth. So help me understand what the need is to have this thing happen before the local government process happens. Like if there was no variances associated with it and we could see a clearer path forward, then I see, the answer may be different, but that's not the case with this one. So help me understand this.
Sure. No, of course. Thank you for the question, Commissioner Messner. There, I would like to address the variances first. The first variance that relates to the RBU, if we had submitted the cup today, would not be required because of the informed consent. So I do think that is a low hurdle to meet when it comes to getting that through the town board. The second relating to Philly Lake, given that the file pad exists and the substantial upgrades that we've mentioned, including the water monitoring wells, and also that the pad is topographically isolated so that there will never be any runoff from the pad toward Philly Lake, I think is a pretty compelling reason that that's not an issue. Coming out of our third cup application review, we received no comments on our variance to that end. So at least from where we stand, we are assuming that that one is good to go. Sound is the only outstanding issue that we're seeing right here. And that is, mainly because of the discrepancies between the points of compliance between the ECMC and the town of Frederick. And we're continuing to work through those issues to find the most collaborative solution. So I would hope that given all of the extensive work that we're going to do, that's going to be memorialized in the COA, will bolster that plan. And at the end of the day, this pad is already there. And so we're hoping that's really the thrust of the story that we plan to tell there, like we're telling here. Like we're already here, and this is going to make it better for surrounding neighbors and provide protections that may be needed 15, 20 years in the future. The second point of why we're kind of pushing into this today is because we do have an agreement with the developer, who is also the service owner, to be done with all pre-production operations prior to July of next year. Because of the number of wells that we're adding to this pad, it's a pretty long cycle time for drilling and completions to occur. And we're kind of running up against the clock, if you will. So if we do start pushing that timeline, that means we probably will start dropping wells, which means we would have to strategically look for other pad locations, which would not minimize and mitigate future impacts to the surrounding area. So we're trying to be responsible developers of the space. And if we do have to drop wells, we may have to reconsider leasehold being held by those 18 wells that we were asking to plug and abandon. So really at this stage, while the variances are rare in the town of Frederick, I think it's also rare that we're trying to go back to a pad without increasing its disturbed acreage for the future. We're adding some new wells and tons of best-in-class mitigations. I'll stop talking.
Okay, well, that sounds like a self-imposed problem, but I think I'm also struggling a little bit with. I mean, you can't drill until you get permits from both the local government and the state government. I mean, you know this. I'm trying to understand, like, if the calendar really is that tight that you couldn't get scheduled onto this process, a week after a decision was made at the local government level, how that really affects your calendar so significantly that you're going to run into contractual issues, right?
Sure. And I think part of that too is that once the OGDP is approved, we still have things like Form 2s to get through. So that's another
I understand that.
months of time and things like that.
It's a few weeks, right? So
yeah. Well, and I think as well, with regard to what we're asking you to approve today, given the limits of what we're doing on the pad and what we've seen come out of the town's process, there's going to be no material changes to the OGDP other than updating the allowable ambient baseline. Ultimately, we're going to be beholden to the conditions as prescribed by the town of Frederick's process. And that's a risk that we are willing to take at this point in time to best meet everyone's needs in this situation.
And just to add on to what Caleb said, that Form 2 process is taking roughly 75 days from submission to submittal before we can get approval. So that has the potential to keep us, from getting the rig on there after we've constructed until we get those Form 2s approved. So we're just trying to get the next steps in the process done at the ECMC while we, continue working with the town of Frederick to get there, get that one across the finish line as well.
Yeah,
And
I would have
Commissioner
a hard
Messner,
time I would have a hard time thinking that Form 2s get approved and in hand before a local government makes a decision on their application, right?
Well, and that's just it. I mean, so we're trying to get that done so then we can construct and then have that, because if we have to wait till after the local government's approved to get our Form 2A, then we have to wait 75 days beyond that to start drilling. And this is about I think roughly 60-day pad build or less. So we'd be stuck waiting for our Form 2s to be approved if we waited until after ECMC Form 2A approval, or after we
Well,
get the
I will note that in the rules, it does talk about concurrent permitting. It talks about sequential permitting. It talks about concurrent permitting being just that, concurrent, right? This is a little less than concurrent. This hasn't even gone through staff at the local government level yet. It hasn't even gone through all of its referral processes at the local government. It hadn't even gone to the planning commission yet. And then it still has to go to the board of trustees. And so I'm not sure this is not concurrent. This is actually sequential in the fact that you're trying to go before the local government in a sequential fashion versus looking more concurrently. I mean, at least get it through the planning commission and see where the planning commission lands on it before having to make decisions here, because that local government disposition ends up being a really important part of my decision-making process, at least. And so I'm struggling a little bit with the timing, and I appreciate all the reasons that you're giving for these things, but this feels premature coming to us. I'll be honest with you, as far as where it's at with the local government process. So, so I'll just go on to my second question, which is talking about reasonably foreseeable development. And I think testimony here is clearly indicated that the subdivision that's associated with this location and the surface owner is reasonably foreseeable development. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how that was captured in the cumulative impacts plan, the reasonably foreseeable development and the potential impacts associated with close proximity to the residents, the future residents, acknowledging that at least in my read of the statement basis and purpose and the setback requirements laid forth in our rules, talks not just about pre-production activities, but oil and gas operations holistically.
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Messner. In that, I believe we contemplated that, the big suite of BMPs that we've committed to help mitigate, that incoming subdivision, as far as like tankless facility, doing bulk separator, three-phase meter, facility design, basically cutting edge. All these BMPs were, agreed to and contemplated in that cumulative impacts plan to mitigate impacts from the incoming subdivision, adding a 24-hour leak detection system on the location, trying to, make this location, as Caleb mentioned in his testimony, prepared for the incoming subdivision. We're going to be, water quality monitoring, a lot of upgrades to this pad to make it better for that when that subdivision is constructed.
Where I was struggling with that was this kind of the impacts associated with the well density and the proximity to homes. And, we're looking at taking a, existing pad and maybe over doubling the number of wells on there, almost triple the number of wells on there. But I didn't see a lot of discussion about like potential impacts associated with that well density versus inevitable impacts that are associated with the existing pad, as developed. And so am I missing that in there? Or maybe you could direct me to that if I'm missing it, but
No, thank you for the additional question. I think it's important to note that even though we are adding 26 wells, I think our emission profile is going up maybe 1 ton of VOC per year, if that, um, due to the state-of-the-art facility design that we have at the location. So really bulk of the impacts are going to come from pre-production operations when we're drilling and completing these wells, as opposed to the production side of things, because we're not going to be increasing truck traffic. We're not going to be increasing, air emissions there, very minor amount. And in fact, with what we're proposing to, reclaim, and as a part of this development, we're actually going to be reducing VOCs in the area where this development is occurring. So I know there is definitely 26 wells adding to this, more than doubling the pad, as you stated. But with our, facility design, we've mitigated a lot of those cumulative impacts associated with the higher number during production operations.
Okay, thanks for that answer. I think that's all I have right now. So thank you for that.
Commissioner Cross?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I was hoping you could provide a little bit more detail on the joint development agreement. Obviously, don't want to go into any proprietary business information, but if you could provide us a little bit more detail on kind of what you're trying to do with that and timing wise on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Commissioner Cross. The joint development agreement it's a three-party agreement between us, the town, and the surface owner. And because of the anticipated incoming development, there's going to be changes of parcels and lot lines. And so we're trying to account for that should the Shores on Plum Creek development not go forward, what that would look like. We also are contingency planning in there. So if the residential development doesn't move forward, what does landscaping look like? Because the Town of Frederick Code contemplates minimum landscaping requirements that we would then be on the hook for over the surface owner. So we're working through those details to provide a sort of financial assurance for that landscaping as well. It's really more how to make these two projects work together the best and to plan for all outcomes. That joint development agreement is now included as a part of our CUP application. So it's one big application to the town that's being reviewed together.
Okay. And you mentioned a little bit about timing before, but trying to, as discussed in the CDPHE letter as well, making sure that all pre-production activities are done prior to any certificates of completion. Is that part of the joint development agreement as well?
That is explicitly a part of our SUA obligation with the surface owner. I don't believe that's formalized in any Town of Frederick agreement, no.
Okay. Is it something that the Town of Frederick is aware of before this?
I believe so, yes. Part of the continuances of this application, we've communicated that to them about what we're trying to accomplish in collaborating with the surface owner as well.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Cross, the town has reviewed the surface use agreement. It was used as part of a basis for the joint development agreement as well as part of the landscaping. So they have reviewed and seen the surface use agreement that includes those timing stipulations.
Okay, thank you. And again, apologies for my voice. One of the things you talked about in response to Commissioner Messner's questions was the slight increase due to the additional number of wells on this location. And I think you said 1 ton of VOC. Was that taking into account the offset from the plugging and abandoning of the other wells and facilities, or is that separate?
That's separate. That's a part of the calculation. The 33 tons of VOC reduces what would be net with the full development plan, including the reclamation of those wells.
Okay, I think those are my only questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions for the applicant? Commissioner Oath?
Thank you. Just one follow-up question. In addition to the commitment for not have completing drilling and completions prior to occupancy of the future homes, I remember seeing in the record that there was a commitment to providing specific notice to potential future owners, but I'm having trouble finding that. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, yep, that is a part of this as well.
And can you tell me again what that is? What the commitment is?
It's a commitment that is included in our SUA. And I'm not entirely sure what the specifics of that agreement are, but it is that each resident prior to occupancy will positively affirm that they understand that oil and gas is existing nearby. And perhaps Bob Bresnahan could provide more detail if we need it.
Caleb, I don't believe Bob was ever able to join.
Okay.
I think that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Further questions for the panel? All right, seeing no further questions, commissioners, what's your pleasure? It's 12:16. Do we want to go into deliberations at this point? We still need to talk to Town of Frederick. Do we want to take a 30-minute break and get a bite to eat? What are folks thinking?
I'd certainly appreciate a break before deliberations. So whether that's now or after some additional discussion, I defer.
I agree. I think a break is appropriate.
All right, let's take a break. Let's return at 12:50. That's about 35 minutes, 40 minutes. All right, we are back, and it is 12:50, and we're continuing with the docket that we've been discussing. Commissioners have had a chance to ask questions. We took a break. Checking in to make sure I've got Commissioner Cross. Can you give me a thumbs up there, Mike? Yep. Okay, good. All right. We still have the attorneys before us. We still could have the panel before us. What do folks desire to do at this point? Do we have anybody, does anybody have further questions of anyone at this point? Commissioner Messner?
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick one, and I'm trying to remember when the existing pad was built. Maybe someone can help me with that.
Yeah, I can help you with that, Commissioner Mesler. The pad was built about 8 years ago.
Okay, so 2018.
18.
My math is right. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
That's what I needed to know. Thanks.
Further questions? All right. Mr. Sura, did you have a chance to speak with your client about the revised edited COA?
I did, and the town supports the language proposed by the staff.
Okay. All right. Well, if we go down that path, we know that we will use the revised edited COA, which both the applicant and the town have agreed to. I think we move to deliberations. Commissioner Messner?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to start. I think I indicated before that for me, this is a tough one, not necessarily because of what's being proposed, but the timing of the review of the two different authorities that have permitting processes over this site. I think there's a lot of discussion, and we've had a lot of discussion about concurrent versus subsequent, and certainly our rules and the statement of basis and purpose, encourage concurrent development where possible, and there's lots of citations in the statement of basis and purpose and rules for that matter that talk about that. Rule 302, 301 talk about that. It's not required one way or the other to do subsequent or concurrent, but the reason that it's encouraged to be concurrent is to try to create efficiencies. And this one I find a little interesting because while I think certainly there's an attempt to make it concurrent, it's shifted to be a subsequent, and it's shifted to be a subsequent. It appears by the operator's choice to have this process go before the local government process, or kind of split. And inevitably, at some point, even in a concurrent process, there has to be a splitting of the processes because we both have, individual land use authority over oil and gas development. And so it can't be concurrent perfectly through, but I struggle a little bit about where this is at in the local government process and where it's being chose to split, because having not had, a staff report developed for this, having it not gone through all the referrals that local government requires of it in order to be able to have it move on to initially the planning commission and then the board of trustees and their process. There's really an unclear disposition from the local government as far as where they're at with this. And it doesn't mean that we can't move forward. But for me, that ends up being really important because, the town also has the land use authority in determining a subdivision that is in proximity to the existing location, and has authority over determining the appropriateness of this new proposal going on in kind of coordination with the subdivision that's being proposed there. The reasonably foreseeable land uses around it, are under the jurisdiction of the local government. And so not having the local government's disposition on this one, or at least the disposition at this stage, is that it doesn't meet the local government regulations, gives me pause as far as, where I would land in making a determination on this application. I do have concerns with the proximity to reasonably foreseeable subdivisions on this one. If I'm applying our rules directly, having some disposition from the local government may shift some thoughts that I may have on that one, but I don't have a disposition of the local government at this point. And so I look at it as, knowing that there's going to be significant number of homes that are going to be in very close proximity to this location. The existing location was permitted prior to the implementation of SB 19-181 and the mission change rules. Whether or not that, at that point, at least, it didn't appear that this subdivision was being contemplated when the initial ad was being developed, or the density of housing that's being contemplated at this point in close proximity. But now we've got this application before us, which more than doubles the number of wells on the existing location, which is a pretty significant well density. Although I do acknowledge that the technologies that are being contemplated and proposed here, are very good technologies to implement. And I do acknowledge that while there is not houses on those sites now, but as I review the studies that ultimately led us to determining a 2,000-foot setback, that did not distinguish between just pre-production operations, but rather oil and gas operations, because there's, potential emissions and impacts associated with ongoing production activities at oil and gas locations that could potentially have public health implications to residents that are, in close proximity. And so having that density being contemplated there is a struggle for me, regardless of the technologies that are being contemplated for the location. I appreciate the work that's being done on the sound study. I think having accurate sound studies in order to determine the potential impacts associated with those nuisances are certainly important. And so at least where I'm at right now, I would be way more comfortable with a stay of this application until it got a little further along into the local government process. I've talked to a lot of different local governments over the last year as far as where they like to be in their processes before it comes to hearing before us, in order to actually have it be a concurrent process. The statement of basis and purpose in our rules talk a lot about coordinating between, the state process and the local government process, and the local government staff and the ECMC staff, and trying to really create that communicative and collaborative process. And it feels like we've veered off on that one a little bit on here. And so, different local governments like to get it at least with a staff report out, or through a planning commission process, or get too closer to a decision-making process where it can be clear at least what the local government disposition is. And so for me, I would like to see it at least get through a staff report or a planning commission steps before it comes before us, where we have a pretty clear understanding that the application is not going to change, that there's not going to be adjustments in there that may have it need it to go back through our process again. And so, I mean, that's where I'm at right now, but I'm certainly open to hearing other commissioners' thoughts on the topic.
Thanks for leading off with deliberative thoughts. Excuse me. Do we have other commissioners with deliberative thoughts? Commissioner Cross?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll say I've struggled with this one a bit too. I think overall it is a bit messy. I agree with Commissioner Messner. The fact that it's coming so early in the local government process is a bit awkward. Although I think I ultimately feel a little bit differently than he does in wanting to see more information from them. I think the best way of describing what I'm seeing in this application is sort of a buyer beware. And I think that applies to kind of all the parties I'm seeing. I think it's a little bit of buyer beware for the applicant to say, all right, even if what we see, we give you a 2A using the extensive BMPs you have, you still got to get through Frederick, and that may not happen. And ultimately, that's kind of on them. I think it's a little bit of buyer beware when it comes to the surface owner, the fact that they want to have a development that's going to be this close to existing oil and gas development. And that's why I appreciate Commissioner Oath's question as well, to make sure that, to confirm that there will be notification provided to future homeowners as well. And I think there's a little bit of buyer beware when it comes to potential future homeowners if they were to purchase someplace that's in existence to existing oil and gas development. And I think it's a little bit of buyer beware with the town of Frederick as well, because they're still working on finalizing development. They're still working on finalizing this. And so they're ultimately going to be kind of stuck with this situation as well. And do they want to approve an oil and gas location that's going to be near potential future homes? I think a couple of the things that really stick out to me, I do appreciate that there will be all pre-production activities completed before any certificates of occupancy. I think that's critical. That's not to say that there aren't dangers or health concerns when it comes to like the actual production. But the fact that it's electrified production, the fact that it's consolidated production, the fact that it's just production and not pre-production activities, it's far less health considerations and concerns that arise from that. I think that the other thing that really sticks out to me is that there is already oil and gas there. And I think that's one thing that I kind of kept coming back to as I thought about the kind of buyer beware with this, is whether this OGDP goes through or not, there's already oil and gas there. And I think from a cumulative impacts perspective, I've been a strong proponent in making sure that there is that beneficial offset. And so, I appreciate Commissioner Messner going into what is the additional impact going to be from the increased number of wells at this location on the production. And it is an increase in that, but overall in the entire area, by plugging and abandoning other wells, older wells, and getting rid of additional facilities, you're also going to be reducing the overall emissions impact that's going to be happening as well. And I think that's something that's important, especially if this is a development that is going to come in anyway. If it's going to come in anyway, in some ways, I see it similar to Draco. I think having the older wells plugged and abandoned that are near houses, that are near things, is going to be far more beneficial for public health and safety than having older wells that are potentially going to have greater emissions, greater concerns, additional facilities, etc. I think the way I kind of view this is it's messy. I don't like that we're so far ahead, as Commissioner Messner said, of the local government process, but I don't think that we can't go ahead with it. I do appreciate all the three-phase takeaway, the electric drilling, the electric production, all the BMPs that are agreed to, that have been supported by CDPHE, that the efforts again to make sure that pre-production activities are taken care of beforehand, I think is important. But I know my voice sounds ridiculous, so I'll also kind of stop there and give everyone else a chance.
Thanks, Commissioner Cross, for hanging with us. I know this has been a long week, and for you, it's been a tremendously long week. So thank you for your deliberative thoughts. Others wanting to weigh in? Commissioner Oath?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and agreed, Commissioner Cross. Thanks for stretching your voice. So I am glad to hear from my fellow commissioners, and I'm not the only one tussling with this one. I think the focus for me mostly has been just this close proximity to the planned subdivision and just the significant questions that raises in my mind. And frankly, I'm trying to figure out how this is even in front of us. Like I can't quite tell if this is one that fell through the cracks of the other processes because they were in flux while this application was being developed and submitted, or if the best management practices and conditions and timing considerations altogether are enough to avoid, minimize, and mitigate the potential risks and impacts. I would have expected this to be the kind of thing that would have raised significant alarm bells at the local level at the time of the preliminary approval. But, it's like they approved the location knowing that there was already existing oil and gas development at the site, as noted by Commissioner Cross. And so then on the other hand, I'm struggling with whether I can take that to mean that there aren't concerns about the risks to the residents, given that it sounds like the subdivision moved through the town's process before there were the reverse setbacks in the rules. And so that raises the question to me of whether there would have been a different outcome under the existing rules and if we would not be here today in light of those risks and concerns that come with having development this close to a neighborhood. I think I also would have expected this to raise significant concerns during the consultation process with CDPHE. But as was noted in the consultation letter, it does touch on the subdivision, and notes that drilling and completions will occur prior to construction or occupation of the new subdivision, which is a really important factor. And so I am pondering whether I find that the commitments by the operator to conclude the pre-production operations prior to occupation, coupled with all of the best management practices, are sufficient to be protective under the rules. I do also appreciate the commitment from the applicant in the surface use agreement to provide specific notice to potential occupants of homes in the future neighborhood. That moves me in that direction, as do all of the strong technologies and best management practices. And then also I appreciate Commissioner Cross, you noting the kind of net overall intent and plan for plugging and abandonment. That also weighs in that direction. But I guess ultimately, if we were to vote today, I'm not sure where I am. So I wouldn't mind a stay, as Commissioner Messner noted, to allow for some things to play out and for some additional time to consider all of the variables here, given that it is so messy. So those are my thoughts at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner Oath. Commissioner Ackerman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I've been relatively quiet during this hearing. I really appreciate the diversity of expertise on the commission. It's great to hear from Commissioner Messner with his extensive experience in local government and land use. It's very helpful for me to hear his thoughts, as well as Commissioner Oath and her extensive experience. Same with Commissioner Cross. I don't think you're going to hear anything new from me. Well, maybe one thing. The first thing is that this is really a very high quality application in lots of ways. And I wanted to recognize that. I mean, we've got reoccupation of an existing site, which we often advocate for to minimize disturbance. It's got three-phase takeaway, which is a quick sentence, but a big saving of emissions and environmental protection mechanism. It's tankless. Once again, very protective. There's no HPH to be found. They diligently sought and received informed consent as required by our regulations. And there are other and many significant BMPs associated with this application. So Red, I think it was the town that started and said this, kind of at face value, seems like a pretty good application. That said, I do think that this issue of timing is an issue. And the reason that we're struggling with it, in my opinion, is because we purposefully allowed ourselves to be in this situation for positive reasons. Concurrent permitting makes a lot of sense for efficiency purposes. But to me, it really mostly makes sense when there is not a significant disputed detail. If there are significant disputed foundational details on either side that aren't ironed out in principle, it certainly causes a snag in concurrent permitting. And I think Commissioner Messner is the one that set this out. But in the end, it could result in an approval by us today, and then subsequent fundamental changes under the jurisdiction of the local government, and then having to come back entirely before us, potentially with an entirely new application, depending on the changes. And I think this is directly contrary to what's desired by the operator, who requested in their testimony that any future action before this commission should be done through a sundry. And I don't think that's something that we could commit to at this point, given the incomplete and disputed nature of the local permitting, keeping in mind that the local government testified that variances from their code are very rare. And so that leads me to believe that there may be significant hurdles yet to work out in principle, foundational hurdles on the local government side. And so to me, if I'm an operator, that's when concurrent permitting starts to become a lot more difficult. And I think, the efficiency here now isn't found through continuing with both concurrent processes, but through working out the most important foundational potential disputed differences that could snag the process, and then continuing with concurrent permitting. So that makes a lot of sense to me to do it that way. That said, as I mentioned when I started, there's purposefully no legal requirement that either process take place first. And so something else that's been on my mind, and I think Commissioner Oath alluded to this as well, that it's hard to kind of see all the details of how this came about. But I do think, one of our purposes here is that we don't want ECMC to be able to hold up or unduly influence the local process, and vice versa. If ECMC is ready to move forward with a permit based on its merits, we should feel free to do so. And I think that, in many cases we can. That said, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily the wise thing to do here without working out these fundamental potential disputed differences that could really gum up the whole process at the local level. And I would say so if it was the same way the other way around. That said, Mr. Chair, I don't know that I have a regulatory reason to necessarily say that this permit should be denied from us at this point. I do think it's wise to have a discussion about timing here and see what the operator has to say about that. And if they still continue to say that they'd like to move forward and then think that a Form 4 sundry should be used for any disputed changes, then I think that becomes a holdup point for me, because I can't commit to sundry changes in the future, not knowing what's going to happen at the local government level. The other main issue of concern here, of course, is the reasonably foreseeable nature of the planned housing development. And I really appreciate Commissioner Oath's thought process here, that she articulated a lot better than I will, but my thought process was very similar. And Commissioner Cross's point that this residential planning is taking place with the full knowledge of existence of oil and gas in a location. And as far as I can tell, the full knowledge that there is an application to potentially expand that oil and gas, and it's still under consideration by the local government, is moving to me. I think that, the local government, with the primary residential land use planning authority here, if they're moving forward with a preliminary plat of the residential development, and also continuing to consider potential expansion of the oil and gas pad, that's moving to me. That said, they retain ultimate authority to say no, our regulations aren't going to allow that. And so I think that all of these things can be worked out. I think that we're here in this conundrum solely for a timing issue, because they have not yet been. That said, if the applicant is amenable to a stay, from a pragmatic standpoint, it seems like the wise thing to do to me. And if not, it would be really interesting to me to hear what the specific motivations are to acquire a state permit first, given the unknowns of the local permitting. Those are my thoughts at this time, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thanks. And I will echo the point that you made about having diversity of background by commissioners as we think through these things. I find myself in a place where I agree with a lot of things every one of you said, which is strange, because I think folks may be coming to different thought processes. I could be fine with the stay. However, I would only be comfortable with that if the applicant was amenable to that. I know that we created a rule set that does not require, as you pointed out, Commissioner Ackerman, and I think as you even said, Commissioner Messner, doesn't require that they always go to local government first, or that they concurrently do it all at the same time. At some point, there's going to be a split. And so, I agree with Commissioner Cross, sort of buyer beware. You're going to have to get your local permit, and that is not a fait accompli. At this point in time, I do note for the record that there has been extensive work between the applicant, the service owner, and the town, including, I think they talked about a development agreement that contemplates how all this is going to work together. And I do note that the town was a petitioner, and while they didn't support or not support today, they worked hard with the applicant and our staff to come up with a COA that is comfortable to them and protects one of their main points of concern. I think, outside of this timing thing, this is an approvable location for all the reasons as articulated by you, Commissioner Ackerman, and you, Commissioner Cross, and even you, Commissioner Messner, said it's not what's being proposed. It's the timing thing that that you stressed as being one of the concerns. And I appreciate Commissioner Oates noting that, the reasonably foreseeable future development was part of the CPHE consult. And we do have the best suite of BMPs and technologies and practices. There's going to be notice to homeowners down the road. I appreciated Mike Cross's point about buyer beware for everybody. I think that's the case. And I think up and until we, redo our rule to require local governments to go first, it's really, to a certain extent, it's a property right being developed by the operator. And I think that the operator has the opportunity to make that call on concurrent, sequential, try to do concurrent, and end up with us first. I do appreciate and always acknowledge that the local government disposition is important. And we've got kind of a strange thing here where we don't have a local government disposition, but we had a local government that played in our process. They petitioned and they've been involved, and they got to a place where they didn't say yes, they also didn't say no, and they said thank you for an agreed upon noise COA. So weighing all that together, I think it's approvable, and I would be comfortable in voting yes. I also would be comfortable in asking the applicant if they could be comfortable with a stay. Mr. McGee, I just asked you a question. Do you want to talk to your client, or are you ready to answer that question?
I am ready to answer that question, Chair Robbins. At this time, Crestone would prefer not to have a stay. First, I can address Commissioner Ackerman's question regarding the Form 4 sundry process, as was mentioned in the hearing. As we've worked with the town staff, and part of the reason that this hearing has proceeded today is that we feel that in our engagement with the town, we have worked out all the significant issues outside of the noise study. So that allowed the town to feel comfortable with us proceeding today in a non-contested manner, because we think we've worked out all significant issues, which it would not result in any significant changes to this OGDP that's been presented to you today. The Form 4 sundry was mentioned because there may be a chance that as we work through the sound issues, there may be some additional BMPs that would be more protective that would be included. And that is our anticipation of using the Form 4 sundry. If anything materially changed, Crestone fully acknowledges that it would have to come back before this commission pursuant to the rules under 301 if Form 4 sundry initiates that process, but ultimately the commission approval may be required of that, and Crestone acknowledges that and is willing to accept that possibility, and will gladly come before this commission if necessary to show any changes. Additionally, we don't feel that there's a significant chance of a lot of modification at this point, mainly because it's an existing facility. We can't really move it, especially as it relates to the variances, which are proximity based, 2 of the 3, the other being sound. Those cannot be overcome by moving an existing facility. So that is another reason we felt comfortable moving forward today. Happy to answer any other questions kind of related to those responses.
Great, thank you for that. So looking around the room, does anybody desire to further deliberate or what? Commissioner Ackerman?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll just make one more comment here, and in the end, I think I'm, kind of coming down a similar position as you, if I'm interpreting correctly. But one thing that I didn't bring up, because it's kind of difficult to really encapsulate what I mean by this, but We have a lot of kind of things at play here. This is the first permit from Frederick through their new regulations. Understandably, it takes a while to figure some things out, and it might be a more lengthy process than it might normally be. Um, it's hard for me to tell if the operator at some point got frustrated with that process and is trying to move that process along by getting the process through our organization first. And I'm just being frank here that I would be, very disappointed, and it's not my intent for if we move for approval here today, for that to be leveraged in any way in the town's permitting process, and that their process should be what their process is. Now, that said, I don't think that it's appropriate for indefinite delay on any permitting process, but there are remedies other than this commission for that eventuality. And so I just wanted to make that statement, Mr. Chair, that what I sure love to see is the operator and the town continuing to work together to be, to end up in an amicable location that works for both of them, and without being used as a lever to get to that point.
Thank you. And I would second that point as well about this. If we were to do something today, that is in no way a lever or anything other than we're also acknowledging the full authority of the local government to do what they feel like they need to do.
So Crestone fully agrees with that and is committed to that as well. To that approach.
Thank you, Mr. McGee. Commissioner Messner.
Thanks. Really do appreciate other commissioners' thoughts on this. And, I do think that there's a number of things that are going to be important for me to understand from the local government process. And it's just not far enough along in the process. And so it can be said by the applicant that, oh, the variances are going to be easy hurdles to overcome, or, we're really like, there's not going to be any significant changes to this. But, our rules contemplate significant changes, meaning that an OGDP has to start over from the beginning. And so I'm not interested in creating inefficiencies in our process or inefficiencies in the local government process. I'm really looking for efficiencies here. And so it's nonsensical to me to not create a little time for the local government process to move along. That's really going to help me get to a more comfortable place as far as the proximity of these homes, which I am not at a comfortable place right now. I've consistently voted to, not approve applications that had reasonably foreseeable future development in close proximity, and especially without understanding what the local government's disposition is on this and whether or not their oil and gas regulations support that or not. And, that's happened in the past, and, I haven't changed my perspective on that. That's an important piece for me. If the local government process went through their process and had determined that they're okay with that, then that changes my perspective. But each time that I've voted to not support an application with close proximity to reasonably foreseeable development, the local government has either not completed their process, or we're not comfortable with it. And so I'm still in support of a stay, in order to allow that local government process, and really to support the local government as they're implementing their new rules and trying to figure out how concurrent permitting works and how they're implementing that, and for us to have a little patience to allow them to work through that, seeing that this is the first time that they're applying that. But understood that if we want to move forward with a vote, that's completely within the discretion of this commission as well. And so, but I'm going to struggle to be able to support the application without more clarity from the local government's disposition.
Thanks, Commissioner Messner. One of the things that got me a little more comfortable, even though they're not finished, was the work between the local government, the surface owner, and the operator, and the development agreement and the contingencies contained therein. Does that, I assume, because of the place that you are, that is insufficient for you at this point in time? Because that's
because I think the development agreement and I haven't been involved with any of those processes, right? But I think the development agreement, as I understand it, has to do with the existing site and the preliminary plan associated with the subdivision and the existing site. And while this new application is certainly contemplated in the whole of it all, I can't see how a local government can, get to a final development agreement to approve an application that hasn't even gone through a staff report stage yet for the new development, right? So the plat that I'm seeing, the preliminary plat that I'm seeing that associates the existing development and may contemplate the new development, but the new development having not gone through the process yet, it seems like that's messy as well. And how that gets contemplated in a preliminary plan approval, looking for a final plan approval. I mean, the local government could provide perspective to that, and I'd be open to it, and it could change my opinion, but that's what I'm looking at right now is I'm not sure how that all ties together without having something closer to an approval at this stage for the new development. I'm not talking about the existing oil and gas development.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but just wanted to clarify that point. Mr. McGee, you had raised your hand. I'm happy to hear from you on this issue. And I also see Mr. Sura is with us and appreciate his work with the town. So I'll give you a chance to chat too, Mr. Sura, after we hear from Mr. McGee.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that the development agreement is done in contemplation of the new development. It would not tie to the existing development. It contemplates the new development and the file OGDP and the new subdivision. That is how that ties together. It's not part of solely the subdivision development. They will do a development agreement with the town, is my understanding, but that would not involve Crestone should the file expansion not occur.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Sura, did you have anything?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that the town is not a party to the development agreement that is between Crestone and File and the File's development. We have a copy of it, but we are not a party to it. And I also just want to be clear that the town of Frederick has always maintained that it wanted to have an opportunity to make a decision on this proposal prior to it going before the ECMC. That hasn't changed.
Okay, thank you.
Robbins, I do want to clarify one thing Mr. Sura just said. The town is not party to the SUA, but the town is party to the development agreement that contemplates this. It's landscaping, it's fire mitigation, it is the various road agreements that tie in to this development. The town is part of that development agreement. It's done through the town process as required when you do a special or a conditional use permit on when you file that development agreement as part of that proceeding. The town is not part of the surface use agreement, which has some of the development obligation timelines.
Mr. Sura, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Okay. Further deliberative thoughts? Commissioner Oath.
Oh, I feel like my thoughts are as messy as as this situation, but I guess one way to articulate it is I find myself still hung up on and just not yet comfortable with approving this application so close to a neighborhood, a very dense neighborhood and a very dense development. And that's not an easy place to be, given there's a lot of things that could get me there. And I'm not saying that I can't get there. I am not there right now. So that's where I am. More time would be beneficial, either for things to play out or really just for more time to think about it. But I understand that that is not likely to be the motion.
But Commissioner Oath, does Commissioner Messner's deliberative thoughts around a similar place, but that understanding from the town kind of a more or giving the town a chance to sort of approve, not approve, weigh in on all of this first. Does that help you at all, do you think?
Meaning if we were to
If
take
we were
some
to
additional
say,
testimony on that
no,
question?
no, if we were just to stay this and let the town go first, that then gives us the local government disposition, which I think would,
Yes.
Commissioner Mesters mentioned that might make him feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
Frankly, it'd make me feel more comfortable too. And I'm just I guess I'm putting you on the spot. Are you in a
Yeah.
similar place or are you not?
No, I am. I am in a similar place. I mean, I don't know what the, would depend on what the outcome of the local government's process is and the facts as we would consider them then, but it would certainly have the potential to put me in a much more comfortable place than I am right now.
All right. With that, and I'd like AAG Bedreau to provide some perspective as well. Knowing that it's not the operator's preference for a stay, I move that we stay this application until final disposition is obtained from the town of Frederick. Mr. Bedreau, did I say that right?
I think that's a valid motion, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Commissioner Cross.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll just say that I'm fine with the stay. I think to me the one kind of sticking point is I think either way, we're kind of looking to Frederick to give their opinion on it, whether we do that now or later. So I'm gonna sit here and think for a minute if I'm going to vote for the stay or not. I don't think I'm opposed to the stay. I just think it's one way or another. We're kind of looking to Frederick's disposition.
I agree. And in the vein of further deliberative thoughts, I would also note that to the town that we don't want a indefinite process. We want to this to go through your process in a reasonable fashion. It looks like there's been a lot of discussion between the town and the operator and the surface owner. If this is going to get approved, it needs to be approved sooner rather than later so that we can get all the pre-production done and not have homes completed before the pre-production is done. Again, entirely your thing. I'm just giving you one perspective from one commissioner about how we are trying to work together. All right, we have a motion and a second, but I do have Mr. McGee with a hand raised. Go ahead. You're muted.
I apologize. I just wanted to clarify. Commissioner Messner mentioned earlier, and several other commissioners had mentioned whether it, instead of being final disposition, could the motion shorten the stay to the point in which it's reached town comments or the planning board, or is the motion tied only to final disposition? Understanding to allow us, if that town can provide more information at that point, which they have previously discussed, that still allows us more time to allow for the timing of this project to move forward with all the competing concerns.
All right. Thank you. My motion was final disposition. I would be happy to amend my motion to something other than that. I don't know exactly how I would frame that. Maybe Mr. Aronoff from the town could help. He's got his hand raised.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Commissioner Robbins. Final disposition is what we would like to see as well. This is the first application that we're seeing since we had our new land use code overhaul, and it's going to be really difficult. We haven't seen an application in years. The elected officials that we have now, I'm not sure. I don't think that they have ever seen an oil and gas application in this town. We have no temperature for what, and it'd be inappropriate to even assume how they would vote. So it's going to be really difficult for us to go to planning commission and then try to indicate what we believe. I don't know if that'd be appropriate, to be honest with you. There's also another thing here that wasn't really previously mentioned, and it's the fact that, from what I understand, without the funds from this oil and gas development, we don't get the shores on Plum Creek. The landowner is apparently using the funds from the oil and gas development to offset the cost of improvements to the area so that the shores on Plum Creek development is even able to move forward. So these two are kind of married at the same time, even though they've been moving through the process at different rates. And so it's once again just it continues to add to the complexity when, without one, we don't get the other ultimately. And so I just wanted to make that known as well.
In that regard, and I think I've got this right, but we've talked about a lot of stuff. There's a preliminary disposition on the South Shores, Plum Creek, or whatever it's called, with a preliminary plat approval. Is that right?
Yes.
But not a final plat approval.
Not a final plat approval, and they're not moving through at the same time, and they're really at the town level kept pretty much separate until we started interjecting, and there's some COAs that are more protective to the residents for the shores on Plum Creek.
And I would anticipate the developer of shores on Plum Creek probably is not in a place to pursue final plat approval until and if the oil and gas development plan is approved by both the town and ECMC. That's just an assumption, but that's what I would do if I was the developer. I'm going to maintain my motion for final disposition, respectfully, despite the point you were making, Mr. McGee. I would encourage all parties to continue to work effectively and efficiently and in a reasonably good time frame. With that, any further deliberative thoughts? Otherwise, I'm going to call for the vote.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, the second is affirmed with that clarification.
Yes, thank you. And I don't know if it was you or John that did the second, but Commissioner Messner, are you okay with maintaining that if you were indeed the second?
Yeah, I don't think you changed your motion, so I don't.
Yeah, I did. Okay. All right, let's do a roll call. Hearings Manager Thomas.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Yes.
Commissioner Cross.
Yes.
Commissioner Messner.
Yes.
Commissioner Oath.
Yes.
Chair Robbins.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that motion passes 5-0 or 4-0. 5-0, excuse me.
5-0. Okay. All right. Thank you. To everyone, we encourage the parties that have come to us today to continue to work with each other, and we look forward to seeing this coming back before us after we understand the final disposition at the town of Frederick. With that, I would move to adjourn. It's been a long week.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Very good. Thank you, guys. See you soon.